The story began in the year 550 of the Kingdom of Madoc, when the main character Ramsay was talking with his father. The father pointed to a plot on the map and told him that this territory was now his. The father, Hans Rugel, was a modest baron with a tiny patch of land in the north of the Kingdom of Maddo, and the plot he showed Ramsay was the northernmost one at the very north. The land was a deserted wasteland where there was not a single soul. The eldest brother Ramsay Ball ruled the Rugel domain. His older brother Kun was just in a Sestanta reserve in case of trouble, and Ramsay, the third son, was simply neglected. In other words, he was just an inconvenient mouth to feed. Ramsay smiled upon hearing that they would be given land and said that this made him a branch of the Rugel family. Hans agreed. Ramsay decided that to distinguish himself from the main family, he should change his surname from now on he would be called Ramsay Bartlett. Hans heard this and asked, was that really okay? Ramsay wondered if it was too ironic to pretend to be equal and at the same time be useless. He sighed it was not the best, but he understood and asked for at least some starting money. The mother handed him a pouch of money and said she had prepared 1,000 rubles. Ramsay estimated that one loaf of bread cost a ruble and decided, as the third son I will take from this all that I can. The mother told him she was sorry and asked Hans if that was all he wanted to discuss. He spread his arms as if saying that as a father he regrets that he can do so little for him. Ramsay smiled and told him not to worry, he would leave in a week. Then he left the house and said he was going to the village. Outside, he thought to himself that he understood that's how it should be. Because he was a reincarnator, his soul age was much older than 13. Previously, he was Shitaro Ikaruga, an ordinary Japanese man, working at a black company somewhere in the north. But one day he died in the most banal way. He was hit by a truck, and he realized he was reborn as Ramsay. Here he had no connections with the nobility, and being the third son, he had almost no chance to inherit the family estate. He could have tried to become a vassal to another lord through marriage, but he decided to go to the land that was given to him. He decided to cultivate the empty, undeveloped land he was given and found his own village. He was determined to make it happen. And just at that moment, his friend Danny came up and said hello. Danny was the fourth son of the owner of the only tavern in the village, and like Ramsay, had an older brother, so he could not claim the inheritance, so they got along well. Ramsay greeted him and asked him to get one thing for him. He told him that he needed rye, beans, turnip seeds, an axe, a saw, cloth, and salt, and Danny looked at him and asked what he needed all that for, and if he was even planning to go on a journey. Ramsay assured him that it was not like that, he was simply told to go and was given the land, so he would live there. Danny almost jumped from shock when Ramsay asked if he was okay. He shouted at him, "Why didn't you say this earlier?" Ramsay explained that he only found out about it that day. Danny began bombarding them with questions. Where exactly is that territory and what is its size? Ramsay answered everything he knew, and Danny asked him if he had any plans. He said he hadn't thought about it deeply and asked him, "Weren't you angry that they were born?" and threw them out as soon as they became unnecessary. Danny was stunned, and Ramsay knew that, like him, the world was full of useless people. He extended his hand to him and promised to make those guys eat their words. Danny smiled and lightly dabbed him, saying they would try. Ramsay was delighted he had gained an ally. Danny asked what he should do, and Ramsay inquired how many in the village had suffered the same misfortune. He replied that maybe there were about 10, and among them were both men and women. He ordered him to go talk to those people and say that they would build a new village together. Danny agreed and assured he would take it on. That they said goodbye, and Ramsay said that now he too must take care of his part. Returning home, Ramsay and Hans immersed themselves in books and papers. Seeing all the information about the land, Hans pushed more books to him. I tell him that he should also use this information. Ramsay knew well that it was necessary to find out everything about the land ahead in advance, especially about the weather, because without a temperature and rain schedule, they could only guess based on the records of neighboring villages. He knew usually snow begins to fall somewhere in mid-December, stays on the ground and remains until the end of February, when it starts to melt, and by April it completely disappears. He wondered, is this the same as Hackaday? Hans asked if that information helped him. Ramsay said yes, and asked to see the map. Hans did so. They both looked closely and actively discussed where the boundaries of their territories lie. He pointed to a small river and asked if it could be used as a boundary. Hans said that was fine. Ramsay then asked whose territories bordered this land to the east, west, and north. Hans told him that to the west was Baron Boden, and the Beverly Mountains marked the boundary of the territory. To the east, the territory directly of the kingdom, and the boundary was the Ted River. And to the north, Baron Hendrik, who oversaw the outskirts, and there was a wall on the border. Ramsay wondered if he would have enough firewood and drinking water. He told Hans that he was worried about the soil, but he would just have to patiently work it. He thanked Hans, said it was helpful, and then returned to his room. Ramsay entered his empty, lifeless room. He sat on the folding bed and said it was time to say goodbye to this room that looked like a storage. He thought that all he had left to take was clothes, a coat, a knife, and a blanket, and 500 rubles were hidden in his pocket. He raised his eyes and saw a spiderweb. He thought that it could not be called a good place, although it was pleasant to eat without doing anything. Compared to the life of a corporate slave in a black company, it was like day and night here stretched out. He thought that it was Danny who had to gather the people, and he needed to get the land document from his father. He knew how much had to be done. Suddenly his door sharply opened and the brothers ran in. They teased him, saying that Ramsay had finally given up on him because of his departure, and mocked him. Ramsay explained he will live there because he has land. The brother burst out laughing and said that it was impossible to live on such a lousy patch of land, claiming that he was completely naive. They saw that Ramsay was still smiling, and it annoyed them. The older brother Bal spat at him and said that he annoyed him and should hurry up and go die in that new territory. They both left his room, and Ramsay composed himself. He said that in the old world they used to say, better to be the head of a chicken than the tail of an ox. He looked out the window and saw the night sky covered with stars. He raised his hand as if he wanted to touch them. He knew he had been given a second life and wanted to seize this chance. He would be the head of a chicken, not the tail of an ox, and with those hands he would carve a new world. The next morning Ramsay arrived at his land, ready to take hold of his territory. He looked at the map to see the markings of his territory. He touched the ground. It was very hard and brittle, and immediately understood plowing would be difficult. He went to the mountains, and everywhere around grew birch trees. He knew that with wood he would have no problems. He touched that soil and felt it was pleasant and fluffy. He noticed that the soil on the mountain was better than on the plain. He realized that the best place to set up camp was at the foot of the mountain. Getting up so early turned out to be a good idea, and he hesitated whether to return to the village. The morning passed, noon came. Ramsay entered the village and felt hungry. He had eaten nothing since morning, and at that moment he noticed a boy calling him. It was Roger, the youngest son of the lumberjack. He ran up to him and was glad to have finally found him. Ramsay then asked why he was in such a hurry. He explained that Danny was looking for him. He enthusiastically told him what he heard from Danny. Supposedly he leads this village. Ramsay clarified that he actually does not lead the village, but rather he is being pushed out. Roger begged to take him with him. The older brother mocked him because he was fat and slow. Ramsay saw that it was like that in every house. He was glad for new comrades, but had nothing to feed extra mouths. Roger sighed and said that his family had been lumberjacks for generations, but all the logging rights went to his older brothers. Suddenly he remembered that he wanted to set up a base at the foot of the mountain, and asked Roger if he could cut down trees, and Roger agreed and said, "Leave the firewood to me." They shook hands. Ramsay congratulated him, and Roger said he was looking forward to it. Soon they both arrived at the house where Danny and other people, all who gathered were waiting. Danny told Ramsay that he was late, and asked him where he had been wandering. He said he was patrolling the outskirts, and then Danny introduced the people he had gathered. Willie is the fifth son of a farmer, and Eric is the second son of a carpenter. Danny said that these two wanted to help Ramsay in his ambitions. Ramsay thanked both and asked why they decided to join them. Willie said that he did not inherit any land from his parents, so if he decides to cultivate it, he does not care where exactly. Eric explained that there is no special reason. He is leaving because he does not get along with his brother. Ramsay froze from yet another quarrel between brothers and sisters, but understood that's how it happens with them. The village was poor, and hardship bred bitter discontent in it. From poverty, hearts and minds dulled, people lost sympathy for one another. Ramsay wanted to create a village that would not descend into such a state. But it was then that Eric explained to Ramsay, they are not like him, as if they had messed up something they can always come back. Ramsay gasped at first but realized he was right. They were not expelled, and if they felt something was wrong, they could pack up and return to the village at any moment. It still hurt him, but he understood there was no point in dwelling on it. He raised his hand and said that they 5 of them would build a new village. Everyone raised their hands together as a sign of agreement, after which Ramsay said he would talk about their plans for the future, and Danny and Eric teased him. They called him a leader and a respected gentleman. Ramsay told them that first they needed to have a basic house and start cultivating the fields. Wanted Roger and Eric to take care of the house, and Willie and Danny to look after the fields. Eric asked about the wood. He was told that birch-like trees grow on the mountain. Eric said that if they were building a house, it would be good to have some mock around. Ramsay replied that they would have to look for it on the mountain, and asked Willie which crop he is best at growing. Willie told him that at home he used robins, wheat, and garlic. He secretly asked Willie if he could take some seeds, and Willie replied that if not too many, it would be fine. At first, they would build a small hut from birch and sow rye and beans, which are easy to grow. Above all, they would look for mountain springs for water, and if they did not find any, they would draw it from the river. Ramsay apologized for the haste and said they could start tomorrow. Others replied they didn't mind, and Eric added that he first needed to prepare a bit and ordered them to cut down a few trees. Denny left just at the moment when the traveling merchant had just arrived. Everyone came out. Ramsay introduced himself and said that he would manage the northern part of the territory. A merchant named Slay also introduced himself and thanked him for his kindness, saying that Ramsay was still very young, to which Ramsay replied that he would turn 13 that year. He said that he had heard from Denny about his needs and showed his cart where his goods lay. He asked them what they needed. Ramsay thoughtfully said that he needed salt for a year. He also said that he needed nails, and Eric added that he would take 100 of them. They discussed a few more things, and when everything was totaled, the merchant said that the total came to about 1,200 rubles. Ramsay was stunned. The amount was higher than he expected. He needed to take care of food and set aside some money for unforeseen circumstances, so he asked Slay to break down the expenses for him. Slay told him that salt for a year was 500 rubles, nails at 3 rubles each, totaling 300 rubles, and fabric 400 rubles, and Ramsay wondered if this was a fair price because he had never bought anything like this in this world before. After all, he grew up as a noble's son. Denny came to the rescue, said it was a bit expensive, so they would have to give up the fabric, and offered 700 rubles for salt and nails. Slay said that he barely made any profit on this, but when he saw how eagerly the youth desired it, he thought that if he made a good impression now, they could become regular customers, so he agreed to the deal, said it was suitable, and Ramsay noticeably rejoiced and thanked him. Slay asked where they were going to build, and he replied that they would head north, to the eastern foothills of the mountain. Slay said he would drop by later to check, and left. Everyone sighed deeply with relief, and Ramsay said to disperse. They would gather their things and meet at the square before dawn. When everyone left, Ramsay detained Willie and asked if he had a minute. Soon they both reached Willie's farm, where his mother was just working. She asked Willie where he had been wandering. When she saw Ramsay, she asked him, "Who are you?" He introduced himself, Ramsay Rugal, Willie's friend. The mother, hearing the surname Rugal, immediately understood that he was the son of a lord, and he asked her not to be formal, adding that he actually had one favor to ask of her. He said that he would like to buy some agricultural products from her and asked how much she could prepare. She told him that if it was rye she could take 3 large sacks, for beans 1 large sack, and for garlic no more than 2 small ones, and he thanked her, asking how much it would be in total. She said it came to 600, but offered to settle at 500 rubles. Ramsay paid in advance, and she thanked him, saying she would hand over the goods to Willie. Ramsay left, thinking that he had made only minimal preparations. At Ramsay's house, when the sky was still barely light, he was already about to leave, and his parents stood on the threshold seeing him off. He sincerely thanked them for raising him up to this point, and he would never forget their kindness. His mother asked him if he really intended to work so hard on his land, and added that there was no point in leaving so early. He objected that he wanted to prepare as soon as possible, and thought to himself that he actually had nothing against his parents. But while those brothers were nearby, he could not imagine staying in that house. Father said he understood, and reluctantly handed him the deed to the territory, as promised. Ramsay accepted it, thanked warmly, said take care, and left. After some time, he finally reached the place where Danny and the others were waiting. Danny told him he was late, and Rans apologized and explained that his parents had detained him. Willie showed him the food he had asked for, and Ramsay thanked him, feeling calmer for now, but soon would have to buy more supplies. Then, thanks to the name Rugal, he could buy everything for a pittance, but from now on it would not be so easy. He slapped himself to wake up, and to his team, "Let's move." Rolling on the ground, Ranji stuck a stick into the earth, and said that this would become their base. Roger said he would go chop wood, and Willie said he would check the soil nearby. Danny also tried to think of something to do, but could not, and Ranji told him that if he was free, he needed a favor. He asked him if he could quickly make a millstone for him. Danny asked in shock if he was serious, and Ramsay replied that he was, and hurried. They couldn't do without millstones because they needed to grind wheat. Danny was disappointed by this and went off, inexperienced, to make the millstones. Willie saw that he was leaving and asked Ramsay what was wrong with him, and Ramsay calmly replied, "Don't worry, he just went to look for stones." Willie told him that, as he had heard, the land there was not very fertile, and the water runoff looked bad. Ramsay agreed and said he thought mixing Natan soil could help. He asked Willie what he thought about it, and Willie agreed, saying that for now that was all they could do. He grabbed a hoe and threw it. "You will find the best place and start digging." Ramsay left this work to Willie. and set off to the mountains to check on how Rogers was doing. He found him and asked, "How are things?" Rogers told him that everything was going well and there were plenty of birches there. And higher up beeches and pines, Ramsay asked if it was possible to add more pines and birches during planting. A thought struck him: pine resin is good for fuel, and if they could get birch sap, it could be sold for good money. Rogers told him that if they grow wild, they will be able to plant them too. Ramsay was delighted and told him that as soon as they cut down the trees around, they would start planting to avoid landslides. He asked Rogers if he could even grow a birch, and Rogers agreed. He helped Rogers cut down trees while Willie was busy cultivating the soil, and Danny was with Milestone. When the day was already ending, everyone gathered, and Ramsay asked everyone if he should tell them what they managed to do during the day. He admitted that he dug the soil, but it was poor. He added that first the soil needs to be well cultivated, and mixing in mountain soil comes later. Rogers boasted that the birch was taking well, and they had collected almost 30 logs. Danny apologized he found nothing. Ramsay concluded the report, thanked everyone, and said, "That's all for today." He knew that everyone had a home to return to, so there was no point in spending the night in such a state. Everyone looked at him embarrassed, and Danny promised that they would get to work and quickly make it comfortable here. When everyone left, Ramsay remained alone and decided to prepare for the hike. He knew he needed water and fire, decided to fetch water from the stream, but he had nothing to carry it in. When he thought about the fire, he thought about the fire. He remembered that he did not know where to start. It was warm during the day, so he forgot about it, but surviving the night without warmth was simply impossible, and he didn't have a lighter with him. He began to panic, but after some time finally started setting up camp. He lit a fire and wrapped himself in a blanket. He had to borrow some embers from Danny and almost froze to death. He was sure he had planned everything, but turned out to be completely unprepared. There were still so many things missing for life there. Eventually, he slowly fell asleep. When morning came, the sounds of friends waking him tore him from sleep. They felt sorry to see him in such a state. Ramsay asked when he had fallen asleep. Eric convinced himself that he had to build a hut as soon as possible, otherwise he would die. Roger thought that if they didn't eat properly, they wouldn't have strength. Willie decided to quickly grow vegetables to fill their stomachs. They all went their separate ways, each had one thought in mind: to arrange shelter as soon as possible. Ramsay said that he also needed to leave. He went to the river and drank water. He just thought about food, but realized that first he needed to make utensils. He knew he wouldn't make refined ceramics, but he had learned the basics in elementary school, so he thought he could manage simple clay utensils. He found clay, thoroughly mixed it with water, and molded a pot with his hands. He thought it should dry for about 2 weeks, but he couldn't afford to wait. There was no time, so he decided to take a risk and experiment, expecting a few failures. He let them bask in the sun a little, then brought it closer to the fire. When the right moment came, he threw it into the fire. After all this, he got a misshapen pot. This disappointed him, but he knew he hadn't let it dry or bake enough, so he had to carefully monitor the fire's temperature while working. He checked and rejoiced. At least it could be filled with water. He placed the pot over the fire and added salt, beans, and thinly sliced garlic. He made soup from garlic, beans, and salt. He even wondered if this could be called cooking at all. When he was about to grab the food, he realized he had neither a spoon nor a fork, so he simply decided to go ahead and eat anyway. And without ceremony, he drank it straight from the pot. He was satisfied with the meal. Who could have known that simple boiled beans could be so tasty? Having finished this, he decided to take up pottery again. He molded several ugly pots and cups. He said that practicality is more important than art, even if a bit rough. If it works, then it's good enough. Time passed. It was already evening. Ramsay realized that pottery takes the whole day and thought he would have to try something else. At that very moment, Willie called him, saying that everyone had already gathered. Ramsay replied that he was coming and when. When he arrived, he immediately asked everyone where Danny was. He hadn't shown up that day. Rogers said that Danny was wildly happy because he found the best stone, and Ramsay cried upon hearing this, thinking that he was really putting all his effort into making the stone ring. Eric proudly showed him a small bed that he had made himself for him. Ramsay was wildly happy and thanked Eric. Rogers noted that it was actually just a roof and floor, and Willie replied better than nothing. At night, when everyone had already left, Ramsay cleaned everything up and was ready for sleep. He made a temporary stove from available materials, but really wanted to make it sturdy from bricks, so the next day he decided to mold bricks from clay. He lay down on his bunk and whispered that the very fact of having a roof over his head and a floor under his feet brought him incredible relief. He slowly sank into sleep. He thought that that night he would probably sleep well. The next morning, Danny came with others, greeted Ramsay, and told him that he brought exactly what was requested and would show it soon, gathered everyone and said, "Let's cheer up and start today." Eric asked him why he was the one in charge. Ramsay ordered to split into teams of carpenters and farmers and sincerely thanked everyone for the day. Herrick and Rogers took on the carpentry work, while Willie and Danny worked hard in the field. Ramsay thought their shelter needed to be built urgently, and they had to sow rye by mid-April. The next 2 weeks he wanted to devote to maximum field expansion, and believed that if everyone worked together, they would definitely manage. After a few minutes, Danny approached and, smiling, asked everyone to try his handmade stone bell. Roger said he would vote for everything to succeed, but Eric said he would vote for it not to work properly, and Willie agreed. Danny told everyone not to place bets without permission. Ramsay said it at least looked decent, and Danny reproached him, "Don't just say it's good." And put some rye in and tried to grind. They tried and felt that something was wrong, so they began to doubt whether it worked at all. Opening it, they instantly realized it ground poorly, and the efficiency was not impressive at all. Ramsay told Denny that the Nile stone has grooves, and drew on the sand how it should look, and Denny sighed, saying it was a bit tricky and would take some more time to finish. The rest of the guys wondered who had won then. Roger said that it did grind, so he won. They all chatted among themselves, and Ramsay looked at them happily, thinking that they were gradually making progress, and therefore, the real development of their Bartlett territory was about to begin. Time past 2 weeks had already gone by since Ramsay settled in that territory. He noticed that everything was going well, and the place finally began to feel like a real village. He said that the increase in the number of allies was decisive. 3 more joined Ramsay in his search. Henry, a 15-year-old sociable boy who lived to draw. Gordon, a 19-year-old young man with a passionate sense of justice, and was very caring, and Charlie, a 12-year-old, younger than Ramsay, a bit timid and with a frail body. All 3 were children of farmers, so the fields began to grow uncontrollably. Ramsay noticed that it was turning into a real boys' village. But they improved the mill. Now it could grind fine flour. At that time, their main food was bread and dumplings. Denny also packed his things and moved to live in the village, and Ramsay could not stand his snoring at night. But he rejoiced, seeing how his territory was flourishing. The next day, Ramsay announced to everyone, "The day of planting the seeds has finally come." He continued, saying that Eric is finishing the house, so the 7 of them will share the work and get everything done. Willie warned everyone to be sure to cover the seeds well. The planting was 70 rye and 30 beans in garlic. He asked Willie if they could finish it in 1 day, and he told Ramsay that if they finished everything within 5 days, that would be enough. After some time, Henry admitted that he wants to have a girlfriend. He asked Danny to introduce him to the girl. Danny asked in surprise if it was the one introduced to him as the 4, and he grimly replied that she was marrying his brother. He said he thought as soon as he has a house among the fields, he will be able to get married. Denny joked, "Now I have fields but no house." Henry laughed, and Ramsay noted that there was a lack of women and, without them, their territory would not be able to grow. Denny asked Willie if he also wanted a girlfriend, and Willie said that he already has a fiancée. This stunned everyone. Danny and Henry asked him if he was serious and where she was, and Willie replied that it was Katie from Peter's house. Danny, irritated by this, muttered that he had been admiring her and asked again if she was nice, and Willie replied that she was one of those you just want to protect. The playful banter continued a little longer, and Eric returned, tried to say something, but stopped and asked where the others had gone. Ramsay said that they had returned to the village of Rugal to look for their dream. Eric was confused by this. A few days later, Ramsay announced to everyone that the plantings were complete, so that day they would go together to explore the mountains. He told everyone that they would go up in turns to reach the summit and find wild strawberries and mountain vegetables. And they set out to look for that pure spring water from the melted snow. Danny decided to organize a race, shouting, "Whoever reaches the summit first wins." Ramsay tried to stop him. But Eric joined Danny and said that he was known as the sewer rat of Rugal village, so he would not lose in speed, and Gordon from behind asked if that was supposed to be a compliment. Danny replied to Eric that he was known as Danny, who lifts skirts, and that he would not lose in speed. Gordon again asked if that was a compliment. Danny sharply cut off Gordon. "Shut up, you're the only one who has a girlfriend," and Eric picked up that they were just talking about fun things without him. Gordon rushed to run, trying to break ahead and be first. Danny tried to stop him, but all 3 rushed forward, and Roger saw that they were so fast he couldn't catch up with them. After some time, Rangy turned to everyone and asked, "Did you find the spring water?" Danny and Eric looked away, blushing awkwardly. Willie and Gordon told him that they came across several places with berries, but there was no spring water. Ramsay realized that finding it would not be easy. And just at that moment, Charlie approached him, telling him that he heard the sound of water. He led everyone to where he found that water. They almost reached the foot of the mountain, and Henry wondered if the water could be so close. After listening for a while, they heard the splash of water. Danny wondered how they hadn't noticed it, and Gordon said it was all because they were making so much noise. Following the babbling, they finally found the spring water. Ramsay wondered how they would manage to deliver this to the base. If they had bamboo, they could have used it as a waterway, but he didn't see any nearby. He shouted to everyone, "Does anyone have a rope or something similar?" But everyone denied it. Ramsay then decided that they would have to go headlong and lay a path from the source to the base. He planned it first of all. One person had to descend to the point from which the base was visible, and Henry decided to do it himself. Then another person descended and stopped where the first was visible. Gordon decided to do the same. They repeated this again, and finally, Ramsay drew a line between everyone, and they set off along it. "And they will trample a path." He ordered everyone to uproot any annoying weeds to make it easier to get through with. Thanks to this, they could travel from the base to the source and back in 5 minutes. Ramsay said they managed to secure the water source. A few days later, Danny was walking in the village of Rugal. Disappointed, Eric met him and Danny asked how things were going. Both were disappointed another day when the flirting failed, and Danny sighed, "I want a girl too." Eric said that searching for a girl in that tiny village had its limits and suggested going to another village because he realized they would probably be looked at strangely. Danny looked at him and said, "It's time for us to wrap this up here." They walked a bit and suddenly heard a noise. It was Ramsay's older brother, Paul, asking his worker what his stupid brother was doing and why he never ended his own life. Danny saw how it was happening and recognized Paul, Ramsay's brother. Paul's workers told him that things were going well in the village of Ramsay. Fewer than 10 people helped him, and all of them were third or fourth sons who could not inherit. Paul got angry hearing this. Ramsay had invaded his territory without permission, and he swore he would finish him off. Eric told Danny that Ramsay officially received land from his father, and that was what tormented Paul. The worker asked Paul what they should do about it, and Paul simply said that he should burn the whole village down.
It was about a missing person who needed to be found.
They rushed to Ramsay to tell him about it. Ramsay greeted them and said that together with Henry, he was making a map of the area, because Henry's drawing skills were very helpful, and Danny stated that now was not the time for that. Ramsay asked if something had happened, and they both told him what they had heard. Ramsay realized that Paul was going to burn the village, and said that his stupid brother only knew how to raise traffic. Eric asked him what they would do if they really attacked them. Ramsay said he would think about it. Eric said that they could not just sit still, but Ramsay tried to calm them down, saying everything was fine, and returned to working on the map. Danny was still hesitating. After some time, Willie approached Ramsay, and with a sparkle in his eyes, said that he wanted to grow grapes. He asked if it was possible to grow grapes around here, and Willie replied that he saw no reason why not. Grapes were quite hardy even on poor soil. Gordon said that he once grew them at home, so he could help. Henry stated that he definitely wanted to drink some wine, and Ramsay added that wine could also be stored for a long time. He said that then they would prepare a vineyard, and everyone immediately started planning. Danny and Eric approached with worry on their faces. Ramsay saw this and asked everyone to take care of the rest. Gordon and Charlie said they would take it on. Ramsay moved away from the rest and approached Danny and Eric, saying he was busy making plans. Danny said he knew they were asking about Paul. Randy told him he believed somehow everything would work out. Danny was shocked to hear this. And before he could even say a word, Ramsay was already walking away, throwing, "We'll talk more." A few days later, Eric and Danny returned to the village and still couldn't gather a single source. Eric sighed. The problem with Paul was still unresolved, and he wondered what Ramsay was planning. Danny doubted whether this territory would really burn, and said they would have to start everything from scratch. Eric irritably grabbed him by the shirt and hissed not to get involved with him because he was the one who got them all into this, so he had no intention of going back alone. Danny asked what was going on and what Eric wanted him to do. Eric got even more irritated by this. Someone shoved Danny in the face and sharply shouted at him, "Wake up." Danny smiled, wiped his face, kicked Eric in the stomach and said, "Funny to hear that from you." The crowd saw that a fight was happening and surrounded them. Danny threw to Eric, "Let me go," and Eric cut off, "Apologize first." The crowd roared, pushing them to fight. Just then Paul with the workers were walking nearby, saw the gathered crowd, and asked what all the noise was about. Eric won the fight and left. Danny is lying on the ground. Paul saw Danny and immediately recognized him. He ordered his worker to take him along. The workers picked up Danny and carried him to their base. Danny woke up his body still hurt after the fight with Eric, and he couldn't understand where he was. He suddenly realized he was in a storeroom and outside the Rugala estate. Suddenly he understood that he was on Paul's platform, and at that moment Paul approached and sat next to Danny. He asked him what he was doing there. Danny was silent, and Paul sharply demanded an answer, saying that Danny was no longer from their village and that he knew he hung out with Ramsay. Danny denied it, shocked Paul, and laughed. He said he couldn't stand that boring rural life. He said he was returning to his village and introduced himself as Denny from Rugalo. Paul laughed, and Denny continued. They asked who would dare to take on that boring land development. Paul asked Denny to join them. His workers chimed in. They said Paul had the best, they serve good alcohol there, and you can meet a bunch of beauties. Denny was delighted to hear this, and enthusiastically said it would be wonderful. Paul smiled and thought to himself that he had found a gap in Ramsay's camp, and they had to take advantage of it. He extended his hand to Denny and said, agreed. He couldn't wait to work with him. Denny firmly shook his hand, agreeing to the deal. A few days later, Denny was enjoying drinks and women and said, this is life. He said that drinking during the day with lovely girls is the best, and Paul looked at him. He said that it was time to smash Ramsay and his gang, and the workers asked if this was finally the moment, and if they were ready to follow Paul. Danny told Paul that it was still too early to say whether they would do it at all. They could wait until autumn. Paul asked confusedly what he meant and if he really intended to spare them. Danny objected. They were working hard planting wheat and beans, so it was better to wait for the harvest and take everything at once. Paul agreed to this. He announced that they would wait until autumn, and until then prepare to smash Theme, and his workers were delighted by this news. Agin and Ranji's territories. Roger approached Ramsay and asked him if there was any problem. Roger assured Ramsay that there was not. But he hadn't seen Danny for a long time and kept wondering what had happened to him. Ramsay tried to cover up, saying he had been busy flirting with girls, and he wouldn't worry too much about it. Roger laughed and Eric looked at them worriedly. When he approached Ramsay to say something, Ramsay stopped him, saying everything was fine, who was already thinking about the next move. He said that they would go to meet Baron Hendrik. He told them that he was heading a little north. Everyone was immediately surprised when they heard this. Charlie asked if the north was Baron Hendrik's land, and Ramsay confirmed. He was going to sell any wood that the village did not need, and the largest town there was Hendo, the Baron's capital. The logs were already loaded onto the cart, and he was ready to set off. Herrick asked him if this was the very next move he had mentioned earlier, and Ramsay confirmed. He also inquired if he was going to the town, and if he could stop by for nails. Ramsay replied yes, and would even bring some rye bread. The road to Hendo took about half a day, so he assumed he would return the next day. Katie, engaged to Willie, was also there, and Ramsay told her that he was counting on her to take care of food for everyone for now. She understood, and he set off. After several exhausting hours, he thought that pulling the cart alone was harder than he had imagined, and his spirit began to falter. After some time, he finally saw the town of Hendo. The journey there took twice as long as he had expected. He realized that going alone was a mistake, and he should have asked for help. As he was approaching the town, soldiers stopped him and asked what he wanted. They saw that he was from the timber warehouse, and Ramsay said that he was there for the first time, asking where the store that buys timber was. The soldier, smiling, told him, just go through the gate and turn left. And when the soldier opened the gate for him, they whispered, do not be afraid. When Randy looked at the city, he was stunned to see such a lively place, and said that it was not surprising at all. It was the Baron's capital. He was looking for the lumber store and finally found it. When he arrived, the shop owner warmly greeted him and immediately noticed he came to sell firewood. He looked carefully at the word and said, he nodded, the quality and quantity are good. He said he could give him 1,000 rubarbara. Ramsay pondered this and asked for more, grumbling that carrying it all the way there was a hassle, and it was in excellent condition. The owner argued and blurted out, what about 1,200 rhubarbars? That's my maximum. Ramsay agreed. And the owner gave him a sack filled with rhubarb. Renzi and Tinkton set off. Wondering what would happen next, he went to the seamstress and said that he would like to have a suit made for him. The woman inside asked what he wanted, and he said directly that he needed decent clothes for a meeting with the master, but did not want to go broke. The seamstress understood and promised to sew it from the cheapest linen for 200 rubles. Ramsay agreed. She took his measurements for the suit. He asked how long it would take, and she replied that he should wait about 3 days. He left the shop and headed to Baron Hendriks's estate. He told the guard at the entrance that he was a messenger of Baron Hans Ragel and that his master wished to meet with Baron Hendrik. The guard heard this and asked him to wait a minute while they went inside. After some time they returned, apologized for the delay and told him that the Lord was very busy and could find some time only in 10 days, so he asked if that was acceptable. Ramsay agreed, saying that his Lord would be satisfied. He left from there happy and light-hearted. He thought that he had chosen the right outfit for the meeting with the Baron and had already arranged the appointment. Now he only needed to buy the necessary things. Having bought nails, rye, and salt, he put them in the cart and was about to set off. He noticed that it was already getting dark and could not afford to waste money or spend the night in the city, so he decided to endure and return at night. Ramsay returned to his village, and Gordon, noticing that he was quite late, anxiously asked if he was all right. Ramsay told him that he had managed and done all the preparatory work, and added that in 10 days he would finally need Baron Hendrik. Gordon just returned, apologized for bothering him, and said that yesterday, passing through the village of Rugal, he saw Danny with his brother Paul. He said he did not want to think about it, but still asked if Danny could have betrayed them. Ramsay smiled and said he had to tell everyone. He told everyone something, and the scene shifted to June 25. On the day Ramsay was to meet the Baron, Rogers was with him and was surprised to see that Hendo was such a large city. He thanked Ramsay for bringing him, and Ramsay said that he himself wanted to sell some firewood, so Rogers's help turned out to be a lifesaver. He told him that after they finished their business, they would look around the city, so first they would sell this wood. After arriving at the shop, the owner immediately recognized Ramsay. He had seen him before. And he saw that day he brought much more. Ramsay told him that this time he brought them in pairs. The owner said he would quickly name a price and asked them to wait a bit. Rogers assured Ramsay that he was confident they would get a good price. Seeing the wood and thinking a little, the owner told them that with this, about 2,500 rubles, that was the best he could offer. Rogers was shocked to hear this, and said that it was too little. The owner apologized, saying they had plenty of birch and he offered 2,700, and if that didn't suit they could look elsewhere. Ramsay agreed to the deal and sold the firewood. Rogers sighed with disappointment. He was counting on getting 3,000 rubles, and Ramsay, shrugging, said there was nothing to be done. We'll leave the cart here and move on. Both came to the tailor's workshop, where she met Ramsay and said that his suit was ready. Ramsay tried on the suit. The seamstress curiously asked what he thought of it, and he smiled and replied that it fit perfectly. Rogers also praised him, saying he looked great, and Ramsay thanked him and added that in such attire he was quite capable of meeting the Baron. He asked should they go. After some time they reached the wasteland. He told the guards that he was Rugal Khan and that he had appointed a representative of his father. He asked Baron Hendrik to receive him. The soldier addressed Rans as sir and asked to wait a little. Rogers recalled that Rans was also a nobleman. Soon they entered the palace, where a maid greeted them warmly, thanked them for their patience, and said she would show them the way. They both followed her, and Rogers admired the beauty of the palace with delight. The maid showed them the room and asked them to enter. They entered the room and settled down when the maid left, and asked them to wait there for a moment. Rogers was still standing in awe and not hiding his amazement, told Ramsay that this was an incredible estate, to which Ramsay agreed and added that this was the residence of the Baron who ruled over this area. That was exactly why he had come, if he could get Baron Hendrik's help. But before he could finish the sentence, Baron Hendrik entered the room, and his powerful presence instantly filled the space. He sincerely apologized to Ramsay for making him wait. Ramsay bowed and said he did not mind. He raised his head and saw Baron Hendrik. He wondered whether the Baron would really support him. Ramsay told the Baron that it was a true honor to meet him and introduced himself. Ramsay Rugal, son of Hans Rugal. The Baron greeted Ramsay, introducing himself as Darl von Hendrik, the lord of these lands. He asked him to sit down and inquired what was on his mind. Ramsay sat down. He strained to recall negotiations from a past life, because he knew for sure one must behave properly before a superior. He had to skillfully conduct the negotiations. A maid entered the room and served them wine, and the Baron asked if he liked it, and told them not to be shy and to indulge themselves. Ramsay thanked him but declined the offer, saying he seemed very busy, so he immediately moved on to the main topic. He handed the Baron's valet an official document. The valet nodded and assured that he would handle everything himself. He opened it and handed it to the Baron. The Baron read it, and after some time, it became clear Ramsay is the third son of Lord Rugal, and he received the Northern Territory. The Baron said he came here expecting more and asked if Ramsay simply wanted to become his servant because he could not manage this wasteland. Ramsay refused, saying that although the offer was tempting, he chose a different path. He nodded to Rogers, and he handed him a bag of money they earned by selling timber. He opened it, showed the money they had, and directly told the Baron. By that letter he received the land, created a territory for himself, and even changed his surname to Bartlett. He told the Baron that he wanted to be under his protection. They exchanged glances, and the Baron, with an interested tone in his voice, said he recognized him as Sir Ramsay Bartlett, but patronage has its price. Is that acceptable? Ramsay agreed. The Baron asked how large his village was, and Ramsay replied that it was not exactly a village, just a settlement of about 10 people. The Baron told him that they would pay the Hendrik family 30,000 rublets annually, and they could start as early as next year. Ramsay was stunned because he calculated he would have to set aside 2,500 rubles monthly. At that time they only had wheat and timber, but there were few trees on the land, the planting rate was slow, and there was a shortage of hands, and he timidly wondered if the Baron could reduce the tax a little. But before he could even ask, the Baron sharply and unequivocally declared, "Not a single kopeck will be cut." Ramsay sighed. Desperate times required desperate measures. He told the Baron that he accepted those conditions. The Baron said it was a wise decision. The butler handed him a paper and began writing an official order, asking if that was all he wanted. Ramsay objected and said he wanted one more thing. He ordered the Baron to inform Lord Rugal that they would not interfere. The Baron heard this and was quite surprised. Ramsay explained that his father officially gave him the land, but the elder and second sons of the Rugal family were not pleased, and it is said, planned to set fire when the right moment came. The Baron understood everything. The tax cuts were not in their favor, so he immediately promised to write a letter. Ramsay said that he also needed a copy, just in case someone dared to invade his territory. He wanted to make it clear, if they overthrow the invader, they would not be punished for it. The Baron understood this, and told Ramsay that he would tell them not to attack, because violating this order was severely punished. He signed the letter and handed it to Ramsay. He promised to inform Lord Rugal himself. Ramsay sincerely thanked him and said goodbye. He and Rogers left the palace, and the Baron watched them from his window. He asked his butler Anthony what he thought about it. He replied that imagining such a small amount could sway them was ridiculous. The Baron told him not to be so harsh on them. They were simply desperately trying to survive. He said that a nobleman must be able to endure such things. He told Anthony that his loyalty to their house was commendable, but sometimes it crossed the line. Anthony apologized. He said that increasing tax revenues was definitely a good thing. The Baron agreed. If you sign a few letters and earn 30,000 rubla, that's not bad, and added that he did not especially expect much and wished Ramsay all the best. Having left the palace, Rogers said that he was starving. Ramsay said that to thank him for the company, he would treat him, and Rogers beamed with joy, immediately starting to look around for food, saying he wanted shashlik, soup, and bread. Ramsay bought them, and as soon as Roger began to eat, he warned him, "Don't choke." While Ramsay was eating, he noticed a weak child who was watching them. Rogers asked him what had happened, and when he saw what Ramsay saw, he also became sad. He asked him if they could do something. Ramsay said he really wanted to help. But he failed. Ramsay approached the child and asked if his stomach was getting smaller. The child nodded, and Rogers gave him soup. The child looked at him confused, and Rogers said that it was super tasty, so he should eat it while it was still warm. The child began to drink the soup, and Ramsay thought to himself that for the glutton Rogers to go that far was too much, but even if the hunger was satisfied here, it would not solve the main problem. Ramsay asked the child if there were many like him in that city. The child nodded, and Ramsay pondered. He asked Rogers if he wanted to help them, and Rogers said he could. He could reach out and save those children. Rogers agreed, saying he would do everything to help. Ramsay then decided something and said to Rogers, "Thank you." He gathered people in similar situations around the sawmill, while he himself went shopping. Rogers walked through different corners of the city with the boy, picking up people who had no home, no job, or even nothing to eat. Ramsay went to the store and bought a few things. Soon Rans reached the sawmill and saw a crowd there. He met Rogers and said to him, "Well done," because he had gathered quite a crowd. Rogers replied that this only showed how many people needed help. Ramsay knew that in the shadows of that wealthy city Hendo, many hungry people were hiding, suffering, and no one was reaching out to them. He felt that if they were accepted as citizens of the Bartlett territory, they could save everyone together, and he shouted for everyone to listen. He introduced himself as Rans Bartlett, and with quiet confidence said that he was the Lord Baron of the Bartlett barony, which lies south of Hendrik's territory. The crowd froze in shock when they heard this. He told them that his land chronically lacks people, and promised if they cooperate, there will be plenty of food. The crowd murmured, people argued among themselves, and one woman raised her hand and asked, "What exactly?" Ramsay clearly explained what exactly they needed to do. If they worked honestly in Bartlett, got married, started families, and simply lived life to the fullest, it would help these territories flourish. The women asked if that was all, and Ramsay replied that in the future they would have to pay taxes, but now he needed their help to build a village, and at that moment an old man stepped forward. And they said that someone as old as him was not needed. Rangy looked at him and asked his name. The old man said his name was Archbold, showed his leg, and admitted that his leg was bad, so he might not be able to help with development. Ramsay could not understand what had happened to his leg, so he asked Archbold if he had any combat skills, and Archbold, smiling in surprise, replied that he understood him well and was once quite a skilled mercenary. Ramsay saw a scar on his knee and said he must have been a brave warrior, then added that there were no more fighters left in his lands and asked him to teach everyone there. Archbold smiled and said it was an honor for him, and if his old friend could help, he would gladly help. Rangy thanked him and said to him, "He told everyone, even if physical labor is not suitable for you, everyone has their place in the work. Whoever wants to join, come to me or to Rogers," and one woman decisively raised her hand, saying she would go. Slowly everyone agreed, and Ramsay began to write them down on the list. After some time he looked and saw there were 73 people there. He told Rogers that they would meet early in the morning and set off immediately, so they had to reach the place before night, and Rogers replied that there were children and elderly people with them, so they needed to be careful not to overexert anyone. Ramsay told him that he himself would go back first. Rogers was stunned. He explained that he first had to talk to everyone in the village, because if he suddenly returned with a crowd it would cause chaos. Rogers agreed and sadly stayed behind. Ramsay told him that he was counting on him, and Roger replied that he would do everything possible. Ramsay thought that finally there was a chance to develop the village, but he did not know how to explain this to everyone. It was already June 26 when Ramsay returned to the village. Willie gladly met him, and Ramsay asked Willie to gather everyone for him. He proudly informed everyone that during this visit Baron Hendrik recognized him as a viscount, so the Bartlett's territory was now under the Baron's protection, and Henry and Eric were delighted. He said that he also heard that Paul and his guys were preparing an attack, and asked again if it was about that adventure that happened recently, and Eric sighed, "It's a hassle." Ramsay reassured them. Everything was settled. The Baron's letter to Lord Rugal was already on the way with an order not to interfere, and if anyone violated it, they would face severe punishment, so there was no need to worry. Eric was delighted to hear this, and Gordon noticed that this was exactly why Eric was especially worried. He heavily informed them of the bad news. In exchange for the Baron's protection, they would have to pay 30,000 rubies annually. Everyone was stunned and worried when they heard this, but Ramsay tried to calm them down, saying that in the lands of Rugala there were twice as many 60,000 rubers. Now the number is less than last year, and this year they were released, so everyone can handle it together. He told them that there was one more thing, and although it was not entirely bad, Eric asked why he hesitated, and Willie cut in, "Just say it." Ramsay told them that many people began to enter this territory. Everyone was puzzled by this. He told them what had happened, and Willie said that Roger and Ramsay had fallen under the spell of those beggars, while Henry and Gordon were a bit skeptical. Ramsay said that he intended to honestly pay everyone later and asked, "Isn't that good?" Henry told him that it was a good thing. Willie was glad that the village would come alive, and Eric dreamily thought about girls. Ramsay exclaimed that everyone was for it, and Gordon put his hand on his shoulder and said that if so they need to prepare to meet them and distribute roles.
Colette hastily said yes, but then pondered.
Willie said he would take care of the fields, and Henry promised to bring more water from the spring than usual. Charlie was confused and did not know what to do, and Gordon said that if there were more people, they needed to do the necessary daily things, plates and spoons. Eric promised that, as always, he would do carpentry, but would definitely make sure the cotton was ready. Ramsay asked him if they had already built several houses so that everyone could live in them, and Eric sighed and replied that they were not finished yet, but if there were more people, they would work faster. Willie asked Rangy when Roger and the others would arrive, and he said they would leave early, so they should be there by evening or maybe at night. Charlie and Gordon couldn't make the dishes in the right shape, so Katie decided to help them. Night came and Henry anxiously searched for them, but did not notice any sign that someone was approaching. Ramsay was worried whether they got lost in the dark and whether they should go to meet them, so Gordon and Eric immediately offered to go. They searched for them everywhere, and Eric asked if they would really come. Suddenly a sound shook them. They turned around and saw Roger, and behind him stood people. Roger waved to them. Ramsay said he was late and worried because of that, and Roger explained that the cart was very heavy and asked Eric to switch with him. But Eric was flirting with women all the time. He approached, asked her if everything was okay, and greeted her on his territory. Gordon scolded Eric, and meanwhile Ramsay was interested if anyone felt unwell or injured, to which Roger replied that they were all fine. He thanked everyone for the hard work during the long journey and said that the village was just ahead, so they needed to endure a little longer. Time jumped to the 1st of July, the house of the Rugal family. Exactly there where Hans called his eldest son Paul. He came with a sister or brother and asked why he was called, and Hans showed it in a letter. They told him to read it. Paul saw that the letter bore the Hendrik family seal. Having read the letter, he froze in shock. The Hendrik family recognized Ramsay Bartlett as a viscount and forbade anyone from harming these lands and their people. Paul got angry about this, asked the Hans what it was, and called for a protest. Hans thundered, "Don't be a fool," and asked what he was going to protest against. Paul said that Ramsay was seizing the territory without permission, and Hans replied that he officially occupied it, he was simply given unused land. Paul was so disappointed by this that he just left. Meanwhile, his brother or sister rushed after him. He sighed at this, but was glad to see that Ramsay was feeling well. Suddenly he realized, the fact that Ramsay then asked to return that paper about the land was preparation for this moment. Even being his son, he was stunned by his insight. He went to inform his wife Helena about it. Pavel sat at home and drank. He boiled with rage. He was so close to breaking into Ramsay's place and was ready to smash everything in his way. The younger brother tried to calm him down, but he cut him off, shut up, and said that everyone needed to decide what to do with those guys. The brother and the worker left him alone. The scene shifted to Danny. He said, "The time has come." He approached Ozma, the hunter's third son, and said that he was going to take him down. Ozma said that they should grab weapons and armor from their nearby. He had a cart. Danny smiled and said he was glad to be going with him. Ozma waved it off and objected. His brother was watching him, so hunting in new lands could be a good change, and Danny added that he was counting on him. Ozma said that he should first head to the village, and Danny agreed and added that he would catch up in a moment. Ozma set off to the village, and Danny approached the girl he met in the pub. Her name was Colette, and he told her that he was heading back to Ramsay, and asked her if she would like to join him. She asked for a minute to think, and at that moment slammed the door right in his face. Essentially rejecting him, Danny knew he couldn't hide in sorrow. He still had to visit other houses. He visited Roger's girl, Gordon's girl, and Alice to invite them, and they agreed to go to the village of Bartlett. Danny was upset. He failed to persuade his girl to come. In the morning, Danny slapped Ramsay to wake him up. Ramsay woke up hurried and saw Ozma and Danny there. He was glad he returned. Danny apologized for making him wait and said he also brought a small gift. Danny introduced his ally to Ozma, and Ozma asked to leave the hunting to him. Danny saw that there were many more people in the village and said that a lot had happened. Gordon approached and hugged Danny tightly, saying he was shocked when he heard that he had betrayed them. Danny apologized and explained that to deceive the enemy, he had to deceive his own team, but by buying time, he helped them. Eric came up and, a little nervous, asked what was in the card he brought. Danny said he gathered all the weapons Paul had prepared, and that should be enough to quiet them down a bit. Ramsay praised Danny, said he was very reliable, and Danny smiled in response. Ramsay asked him to also lead the local soldiers, and he agreed, but then suddenly he realized he was mistaken. Ramsay called Archibald and introduced him to Danny, saying that he was a candidate for captain of their soldiers. He said he was going to train them really hard and told Danny to listen carefully to Lord Archibald. At Paul's home, his worker woke him up. They told him that Danny and Ozma were nowhere to be found. Paul was terribly angry about this and asked, how dare they treat him like that? He swore he would finish them off. It was July 3rd and 4 months had already passed since the Bartlett territory was established. The number of people was growing and the village buzzed with life. They also started a register for those who moved from Hendo, recording names, age, and gender to see who produced how much harvest and how much labor they contributed. Among the newcomers were 14 children and 59 adults, including 2 elderly, by gender approximately 3 to 4, slightly more women. Most were experienced farmers, and there were also a few seamstresses and blacksmiths. Many lived on simple earnings, such as transporting goods. They decided to focus on agriculture and immediately assigned roles accordingly. While he tended the rye, Gordon watched over the grapes, Henry cared for the beans, and Charlie handled the garlic and turnips. Roger, Eric, and Ozma were not forgotten either. Each was given an apprentice assistant to manage the work together. Danny was currently leading 5 new recruit soldiers, while the rest immersed themselves in work, cultivating fields and clearing land. Ramsay saw that everyone had united and was working hard to raise the village. He thought about how to expand because he himself wanted to create several local delicacies. Ramsay was happy. He had always dreamed of such a life. A few days later, July 14, Katie, together with other women, approached Ramsay. She said she needed to talk to him for a minute. Ramsay felt somehow strange, and Katie showed him the warehouse, saying that food supplies were small, only one sack of rye was left. Ramsay realized this was bad, and Katie warned, at this pace they would not last even 10 days. Ramsay asked Tina to call everyone. Aliza said bitterly that she had already cut everything she could, but beyond that was the limit, and Ramsay wondered whether to start harvesting the village earlier. When everyone arrived, Ramsay said he wanted to ask everyone something. He asked what they were currently growing in the fields and when to expect the harvest. Willie told him they would be ready by next August, and the harvest promised to be good. Henry said the beans should be ready at the beginning of August. Gordon said the grapes still needed time, so they had to be patient. Charlie said the turnips could be harvested soon. Ramsay and the other women looked intently at Charlie, and he asked them what happened. Ramsay took him through the warehouse and, with anxiety in his voice, said that there was almost no food left, so getting those turnips as soon as possible would be a huge help. Charlie said he wanted to sow at the beginning of April to have 3 harvests a year, but this year he was late, so they would only manage this one and one more at the beginning of November. Katie asked what harvest they were counting on, and Charlie replied that if everyone ate, then probably only for about a month. The women began to consult among themselves. There should be enough turnips this month. By that time the beans would ripen, and then there would be enough beans, so they would somehow manage. But they knew that turnips alone would not last even half a month, so they decided to gather wild herbs and ask Ozma for help, and the boys noticed that the girls were very reliable. Ramsay saw that they had a food crisis and immediately understood he needed to come up with a plan. At night he set off to. Osama asked him if he had a minute, called him sir, and started to run when he stopped him. He told him to call him Ranji as always, and added that he could boldly ask for anything. Ranji replied that he actually wanted to talk about food. After explaining the situation, Ozma understood everything and said that to feed the whole village, they would have to hunt large boars, and Ramsay asked if they could aim for something like that. Ozma explained a little. Boars are large and leave a lot of tracks behind. He added that in any case, starting tomorrow he would hunt big game, and Ranji said he was counting on him. Ramsay left Ozma's house and thought to himself that relying only on her was not enough. Another solution was needed, if there was one at all, and he thought about it for a long time. In the morning Ranji went to the spring. The Tej River flowed along the border of the royal domains, and he felt that his plan might work. He was going to catch fish with stones, hitting one stone against another in the water, stunning the fish nearby and grabbing them. He did not want to disrupt the balance of the ecosystem, but desperate times called for desperate measures. He lifted a giant stone and walked on the surface of the river, and then he slammed it against the stone, because of which the fish nearby rose up. He decided to do everything possible for everyone in the village. Soon he caught a bunch of fish and loaded them into his cart. He hurried to bring them home while they were still fresh. He believed that everyone would be happy when he returned, he saw that everyone was discussing something among themselves. Just then Katie called Ramsay and asked where he had been. He tried to tell her about the little fish she had, but she replied that it was not yet time for that. But Ozma brought them a terribly boring guest. Ramsay again tried to say that he also managed to catch fish, but Katie did not listen to him. She was thinking about how to cook the boar. Ramsay was upset. He did everything he could, and Danny comforted him, saying it was just an unlucky time. It was already August 2nd, and the fields were abundant with a wonderful harvest. Ramsay asked Willie if it was already time to harvest, but Willie shook his head. No, it still needs to ripen a little more. He left the decision to Willie and told him to call when it was time to harvest. Ramsay later visited Henry, asked how things were, and Henry replied that the crop looked great. Ramsay asked him about field expansion, and Henry said he had already figured out the tasks and would bring the map later so he could review it. Ramsay offered to help with the household chores, but Henry refused. No need, just relax. Ramsay left Henry, mentally repeating to himself how bored he was. He had already finished all the papers regarding the village expansion plans. Roger and Eric had students, so he just sat and twirled his fingers. It was then that Danny came up and saw that he was just loafing around. Dancy felt that Danny was up to something, so he tried to get out of it, muttering that he had things to do, but Danny grabbed him, took him to Archibald, and decisively announced that from today Ramsay would join the training sessions. Archibald rejoiced upon hearing those words. As a lord, he had to fight to protect his people. At first he put on armor and rushed to run, but it was extremely difficult for him because the armor was too heavy. Then he had to practice strikes with a wooden sword, and when he asked how much longer it would last, Archibald replied that he would have to continue until he mastered the correct form. After this, Archibald told him to dive into real combat, training chopping, steps, and everything else must be ingrained in his body. Ramsay sparred together with Denny. He told him that he would definitely hold a grudge. Denny told him that he still holds a grudge. Archibald smiled happily, seeing everyone in high spirits, although someone said it was just a fight. It was October 15, and Paul went to the tavern again. His workers noticed that lately he had been hanging out there too often. Paul slapped the empty mug and croaked to the bartender, "Bring me some more drink." The bartender apologized. They ran out of ale, and Paul immediately cut in, "If there is no ale, then bring wine, mead, or at least something." Ramsay still annoyed him, and he wondered if there was any way to make Ramsay swallow his own words. At that very moment, one of the workers, Ivan, approaches him. He was told straight that if he didn't like Ramsay, it was better to just finish him off. Paul threw an empty mug at him, called him a fool, and added that his father would stop him. I told him that for Paul, this might be forbidden. But they were not nobles, so nothing was forbidden to them. Paul was surprised by this idea and burst out laughing, saying it was a good idea, and he couldn't believe he hadn't thought of such simplicity himself. He said it was simple. Instead of Paul Rudgel, they would dress up as thieves and raid their base. He saw that they were unarmed now, so he ordered everyone to hurry and prepare, and when one of the workers asked when it would be done, he replied that it would be after the snow melts. His worker enthusiastically told him to do it right now, because his muscles itched with the desire to act, but Paul told them again that he had no weapons at all. He sighed. The preparation would take at least 3 months, the snow would soon start to pile up, then it would be hard to set it on fire. He whispered mentally to Ramsay, "Just wait, I am going to destroy your hideout completely." Rans and Danny were wildly having fun after they were exhausted during training. It was already November 3rd, and winter was almost creeping up to these lands. Ramsay was walking down the street and felt a cold, piercing wind. He knew that by mid-December the snow would lie, so it was necessary to prepare for winter. Therefore, he told Danny and Eric that he was going to Hendo for supplies and asked them to help. Because this time he had a lot of wood, Danny agreed and said he would guard him, and Eric smiled, said it sounded fun, and was going too. He understood that they just wanted to have a break in the city. He understood everyone sometimes needs a rest, so he decided to leave them alone together. The 3 of them set off to Hendo and arrived there on time. The guard recognized Ramsay, and he headed to the yard with the wood. He told the owner that he was looking for a buyer for a few boards. The master saw that this time he brought just piles of firewood, and as always, they were of the highest quality, so he said he could offer 9,000 rubri for them. Ramsay thought to himself that birch was unnecessary, so it would be cunning to negotiate the price, and Denny had already ordered the owner to make a nice round 10,000 rubar. The owner said he could not be held back, and immediately agreed to that price. Ramsay was stunned by this. They confronted the master and accused him. They said he had said that on that day he had an extra birch, so what happened? The master barely uttered words, and Ramsay forced him to spill the truth and promised to come back for more. The master said that the sensation was Lord Hendrik from the borderlands. He was buying up all the timber, leaving others without supplies that year. He brought almost 3 times the usual amount, so he wanted to stockpile as much wood as he could get. Ramsay was surprised by this, and Denny thanked the owner. When they were leaving, Denny asked if there really was that much firewood in the Lord's house. Ramsay replied that it was a large estate, and Denny just sighed the prices should have been raised. Ramsay said that if he had not found out, this information would never have surfaced. He noticed that Eric saw something. He asked him if he wanted something. Eric said it was not about that, and Ramsay noticed that he was looking at the coal. Denny noticed that coal was wildly expensive, and Ramsay explained, winter was approaching, so demand had jumped. Eric inquired whether it was possible to make charcoal on Bartlett's territory, and Ramsay agreed. A TV show from the past came to mind. An idol group literally built a kiln for charcoal from scratch. Ramsay told him they could, and Eric got excited. "Let's make charcoal ourselves." Danny asked if it even made sense and said firewood was good enough anyway. Eric told him that charcoal sells for a high price, and Danny waved it off. "You can just buy it at a good price, and making charcoal is a waste of effort." They argued a bit, and Ramsay tried to calm them down, saying both sides had valid arguments. He told him to wait for now. When Eric asked why, he explained. First, even if they managed to make charcoal, if it was half raw, it could explode, so it was dangerous to use. Firewood and charcoal burned for the same amount of time. The only difference was whether smoke was produced. To avoid poisoning, it was better for the smoke to be visible. Eric understood, and Danny praised him, saying he was surprisingly knowledgeable. If they had extra, they could try making some. A good opportunity to learn. Eric was glad to hear this. He said they should quickly finish their shopping. And everyone agreed after buying a bunch of things. Danny asked if they really needed to make so many supplies, and Ramsay replied that yes, food disappears instantly. Eric got angry upon seeing that Ryan was brought and said he wanted wheat. Danny replied that he understood it is easier to grow rye in the village, but asked if they could just buy wheat. Ramsay told them that rye is cheaper than wheat, and at that time they needed large quantities of such grain. Moreover, rye is more nutritious. Eric and Danny heard this with surprise, and Ramsay thought to himself that in a world without hospitals, if you get sick you either treat yourself or die, and he really wanted them to recover, so he said to load the things and return to the village, and everyone agreed. When they loaded up, everyone immediately realized that it was very heavy. They had taken too much, and Eric asked when they would return. Ramsay said they should shut down and keep pushing. Eric asked Danny to allow him to take a break for some time. Ramsay saw that the cart was very heavy and thought about its weight. On November 10, Danny and Ramsay dug the ground. Danny said that he had just told them that they would not make coal, and asked in surprise why he tried to build a coal furnace that day. Ramsay said he had not planned that yet, but his arguments were strong. He said he realized something. That's how it happened. The firewood turned out to be heavy. He continued, if it is carbonized and the moisture removed, it will become much lighter and easier to transport and use. Danny agreed, and Ramsay said he would need his help. Danny agreed to help. After encountering a large pit, they caused the flue and smeared the walls with clay, and Ramsay told Danny not to forget to line the bottom with straw. Then they tightly packed everything that could be turned into coal logs and branches, and to prevent air access, they covered the top with rye bran and similar materials. As soon as they blocked the entrance with bricks, set fire to the firewood inside, and sealed everything tightly, the kiln for charcoal burning was ready. Danny asked if it would really turn into coal, and Ramsay said he wasn't very sure, but maybe they would adjust it along the way. At that very moment, two children appeared who were on the mountain gathering leaves and twigs. They saw Ramsay and Danny. Ramsay asked what they were doing so far away, and the girl explained that she came to collect leaves and branches for a fire because it was cold. Ramsay warned her not to stray from the village. The mountains could be dangerous, and she agreed. Danny said he would help too, but the guy waved him off and ordered him to return to work. Danny just said that he had just finished another task, and Ramsay thought about what else needed to be prepared. Someone approached Henry and asked about crafting in winter. Ramsay explained that as soon as the snow piled up, they would not be able to work the fields, so he decided it was worth taking up wooden crafts. Henry asked if it was about spoons and forks, and Ramsay agreed, saying he had asked Charlie to make a prototype. They went into the house, where Charlie and Aliza were diligently crafting from wood. Charlie explained that he tried to make a chair, and Ramsay told him it looked great. He also noted that they might be too small to sell, but they would be quite suitable for the village. He looked at Aliza's work and froze. It was some strange thing. When he asked what she was making, she was surprised he couldn't tell. She insisted that it was definitely a bear with a fish in its mouth. Ramsay was shocked. Hearing this, he only said that he hoped they would sell well. Aliza was confident it was a masterpiece, so obviously they would be bought up. Ramsay called Charlie and said that firewood was in short supply, so he wanted to keep Aliza away from it. And Charlie agreed. Aliza asked if something was wrong, but Ramsay waved it off and said it was nothing. He explained that those with skillful hands were better off making figurines or decorations, while others would be suited for spoons and bowls, and Aliza added that the scene seemed quite safe. Ramsay assigned the task to Henry and Charlie, and as if casually, said he would go for a little walk around the village. Just then Eric called Ramsay and said that the construction crew was already assembled. Ramsay replied that they needed to start repairing each house immediately. They approached different houses, preparing them for the harsh winter. In winter, they had to be careful with heating. To avoid frostbite and carbon monoxide poisoning in cramped houses, simple chimneys were installed for the stoves in each one. They decided to make that section a fireplace, and he only asked the workers to make sure the chimney would be tall enough for the smoke to exit outside, because the houses had the same design, so they would do the same in the others. Eric and the others were ready to return to work, so Ramsay let them go. He sighed with relief. Finally, it seemed they would just manage to prepare for winter. And so the first winter stepped onto the Bartlett territory. A few days later, Danny was playing snowballs with other children, but they scolded him and shouted, "Behave your age." Danny said it was too sweet, and in a serious fight, age did not matter. Just at that moment, Eric hit him in the face with a snowball. He called Eric a boor, and Eric in response called him a slowpoke. They fought a little, and the children had already made a plan to attack together and get rid of both. Ramsay was looking from the cabin and could not believe his ice thieves were really still doing it in such icy cold. The territory of the Bartletts was completely taken over by winter, and the snow reached up to his waist. They distributed supplies, but he was worried about the people trapped inside and wanted to go check if they were all right. But he himself realized he really was catastrophically short of money. They had to pay taxes to Baron Hendrik, so they needed to ensure a stable income. He was racking his brains on how to scrape together money. He saw that there are two ways. One is to increase productivity and sell mountains of goods. We knew that relying solely on human hands was unrealistic, so they had to organize work in the fields and forests. He imagined tractors and chainsaw felt that with their current technology, he could only think about what they would not be able to prepare for. He knew this method would not work and moved on to another option, which made the products themselves more valuable. He strained his brain trying to come up with something that would sell well. The grapes were not yet ripe, animal hides could not be gathered, so only rye, beans, turnips, and wood remained, and he knew that rye was probably best suited for consumption. He tried to recall some product made from rye flour when suddenly he heard a voice. It was Danny and Eric, who had frozen. They said that those children were bursting with energy so much so that it became a problem. Eric agreed, and they both sat by the fireplace. They said there were lots of dresses there, and in this bitter cold, something to warm him from the inside would be just right. When Ranji heard this, it occurred to him. Using Rhea, the easiest thing would be to make alcohol. He remembered his past life when he lived in northern lands. There was a young exchange student named Arjun who came from even further north, and he told them that alcohol could be made from bread. The method to make alcohol that he showed them was so simple that it barely etched itself into his memory. Ranji called everyone and enthusiastically told them to make some alcohol. Willie and Gordon came to help, and Gordon said that, as he had said, he had prepared rye bread. Ramsay thanked him. They were about to make kvass, a light, low-alcohol drink widely consumed in Russia and beyond. The only downside, it did not reach 3 alcohol. First, they baked rye bread to a golden crust, then dissolved yeast in warm water and gave it some time to start fermenting. Then they poured warm water into a large jug, added toasted bread, wild berries, and fermented yeast, covered it, and the berries, whose sugars fermented, produced alcohol and enriched the flavor. Now all they had left was to wait until the fermentation was complete. Willie asked how long to keep it, and Ramsay shrugged. He wasn't sure either. They'd have to try every half day. Danny volunteered to taste, but Eric interrupted him, saying Danny didn't have a palate for flavors, so he asked Ramsay to entrust it to him. Ranji promised to take it to the 2 of them and strictly warned, do not drink it without permission. They drink it in the meantime and afterwards. After a few days, the pot was emptied, and both of them sat down, and guilt was visible on their faces. While the others were angry, Ramsay expected this. He asked what time would be best. Danny said the morning of the 3rd day, and Eric thought the 2nd night was better. Ranji asked them if it had really turned into alcohol, and Danny confirmed. He felt warm, so he decided it was indeed alcohol. Willie said the brewing was successful. Gordon added that they needed to find out how much rye should be used for brewing, and Ramsay promised to check the ledger and count. He told Eric and Danny that since they drank everything without permission, their punishment was to gather berries on the mountain. Eric asked if really in such cold, and Ramsay only replied that that was the punishment, so they went into the heavy snow to the mountain to gather berries. And so the 6th of January came. A week had passed since the new year, and the cold still bit. Ramsay tried the alcohol and said that next time they needed to add more yeast. And at that very moment, Danny King shouted at Ramsay. Ramsay asked him to calm down, but as soon as he entered, Danny sharply said that now was not the time for that, and that Paul still wanted to finish him off. This threw Ramsay off. He said that his brother had some serious obsession, if only he could direct that passion somewhere else. He asked Danny where he had heard that, and Danny replied that he was returning to the village of Rugal to see his girlfriend and heard it right there. Ramsay said they needed to talk about what would happen next and asked him to call Ozma, the old Archibald, on his behalf. Danny agreed and led them to Ramsay's house. Ramsay apologized to Archibald for disturbing him in the snow, and Archibald asked what trouble they had gotten into now. Danny explained the whole situation and added that Paul was again stockpiling weapons in the armory. Ozma asked if this story was true, and Danny replied that he heard it from Colette in the village of Rugal, and if he was worried they could send someone to scout. Ozma added, "Didn't the Earl say not to meddle with Ramsay, or didn't Paul hear that?" Archibald said that even after the warning, he still wanted the Lord's head. Ramsay grimly replied that as long as no one found out he was a killer, that suited him. He continued to repeat that this was exactly the problem, the conditions were too favorable for him. Denny asked about it and he explained. The condition for Pavlo's victory was to overthrow him, and if Pavlo was caught or killed, he loses. They only had to repel Pavlo and do so with minimal losses. Ozma said that burning their houses was a complete hassle, and Ramsay added that the timing of the attack entirely depended on Paul, so everything was in Paul's hands. Archibald insisted, lure Paul outside and strike. Ozma said that the bait would probably be Ramsay, but there was a risk that meanwhile the village could be attacked. Denny asked if he should report to Ramsay's father and force him to re-hen in. Ramsay said that Paul and the others would just pretend to be stupid because they act secretly, and in any case, he believed that action should only be taken after the snow melts. He said that until then they needed to gather information and come up with a plan. January 11. The boy smiled and asked his sister if she wanted. One of his workers saw the armor and swords and exclaimed that these were really good things. He asked Paul how he managed to get them, and Paul explained that, as the merchant in the sleigh said, everything becomes tense in the capital, so they used this to appease his father. I haven't asked him yet if he can try on the armor, but Paul said he could, saying that as soon as the snow melts, they will strike for real, so he should get used to that iron sword by then. One of the workers asked what they should do with the rat that got inside, Paul to Rees. I told him to just leave it alone. He knew that Ramsay's allies had infiltrated the village of Rugal, but they said they came to visit their parents. You can't just drive them out, so it was better to strengthen one's own power. His main goal was to overthrow Ramsay, so the other villagers were unimportant to him unless they got in the way. He said he would leave his weapons and armor there and ordered the worker not to lose or steal them, because if something happened again, he would make them pay for it. The workers were gripped by horror at this. Ivan went outside. Pavlo ordered him to take the gates to Tom and John. He said that Paul was very demanding because he had to carry that heavy bag through heavy snow and rain. He reached Tom's house and knocked on the door, calling to see if he was there. He saw the light confirmed that Tom was inside and started knocking even louder. Tom opened the door and immediately apologized. Tom said he was just drinking and offered to join. Eden agreed to come in for a bit. Tom kindly let him in, and Eden then noticed another person inside. I even asked who it was, and Tom told him it was his friend. It was Henry. He introduced himself, brought some drink, and told Eden he was glad to meet him. He told them the drink was called kvass and added that it wasn't the best, but quite suitable for getting drunk. He noticed Ivan with the bag and asked what he was carrying. Aiden got nervous because he thought he wouldn't be able to talk about it with outsiders. He told Henry that things were escalating in the capital and maybe a draft would be introduced. Tom was stunned and asked if it was true. Biden admitted that he also knew little Paul had already told him about it. He handed the bag to Tom, saying it was for him, and drank a glass of glass. Saying it was unexpectedly good, Henry agreed, and Aiden said that since Paul started causing chaos, he couldn't get himself a drink. Henry asked how much they would pay for the drink, and Ivan waved his hand. I'll give 3 rubles for a mug. 5 is already too much. Ivan and Tom started laughing and having fun with each other, and Henry thought to himself that their plan was working. The scene moved to Hendrik's palace. He addressed his butler and asked how the king was feeling. The butler told him it looked bad, and probably it was only a matter of time before he died. He added that the succession issue was already intensifying. Hendrik said that the rivalry for the throne between the prince and the king's younger brother was extremely exciting. King Magic V was fading from age and barely hanging on the brink of death, while the struggle for the throne was heating up between Prince Emo and his much younger brother, Duke Ignis. Hendrik knew that the true heir was Prince Emo, but the footman interrupted him, saying that the prince was a fervent supporter of the empire. They looked at the map of the Pinjir Empire and knew. He had already taken as wife a princess from Western Pinjira, and they even already had children. Hendrik said that if this continued, their kingdom could be swallowed by imperial ambitions. The butler asked whether to continue supporting Duke Ignis, and Hendrik replied that the empire recognized no faith except the Holy Divine Church, and that was a huge problem. He was confusedly thinking about what move to make. The butler asked him what his plan was. Probably he had something in mind. Hendrik laughed, seeing that the butler was already in the know. He said he planned to use the chaos to expand his territory. He resolutely declared that he was going to attack Baron Borden. The butler nodded. Baron Borden was also on the side of the empire. He married an imperial noblewoman and, they say, got rich from trade. Then the butler asked why he would even invade. And Hendrik said that he would create it from scratch. And so February 18 came. Ramsay was walking and saw that the snow was finally melting, but the ground was still treacherous. He needed to stop by Hendo for shopping, because he had spent more rayon cast research than expected. Soon Danny arrived on a loaded cart and said they had loaded all the wooden products that could be sold. Ramsay asked if it was time to set off, and Danny agreed. After a few steps they rested, and Danny asked him where they could sell wooden products here. This time they could not sell the wood to their usual supplier. He asked if there were any contacts, and Ramsay replied that he hadn't even thought about it. He said it was best to ask the one who knew the whole town. They approached the Hendricks estate, and Ramsay approached the guard, introduced himself as Ramsay Bartlett, and said he would like to meet Mr. Anthony. The guard went inside to call him, and Danny got angry. This is Count Hendricks' estate. You can't just barge in here. Ramsay agreed. He can't meet the count, so he asked to call the steward. Hendricks' butler Anthony came out and greeted Ramsay. Ramsay apologized and said he had a question for him. He asked if a permit was needed in this town to sell alcohol, and Anthony replied that if he supplies stores, especially for people, a permit is necessary. He asked Ramsay if he intended to trade here, but Ramsay denied it, saying he was only dealing with money for his excellency and hoped Anthony would tell him where to buy timber, wooden goods, and alcohol. Anthony thought to himself that Ramsay was a bold little monk, and Ramsay knew it, but as a court envoy, he understood that Anthony could not just brush him off. He did not want rumors to spread that the count did not value his vassals. Anthony sighed deeply and said that Colin's trading was for wooden goods, alcohol, soap, and tavern, and for timber the best was Doggy's shop. Danny was already bored, so Ramsay addressed Anthony and asked if he knew any rumors from the capital. Anthony asked him what he meant, and inwardly just wanted Ramsay to get out of there already. Ramsay asked him if he had heard, and said he would tell. He said that in the capital, it seemed, troubling movements regarding the succession were brewing, and asked him what he thought about it. He said that surely Anthony knew about it. Anthony was stunned. Thinking so, he realized, since he had already feigned ignorance, he could not speak lightly. If he remained silent and Lord Darrell Hendrik called him, he might sharply cut him off. Weren't you told there would be no action? But he could not just relay the calculations and tension on his own. Suddenly he realized that he had underestimated Ramsay, taking him for a simple country boy, and was stunned to think how far ahead he had thought. He shouted to Ramsay, "Faster, sell those goods." And Lord Darrell spoke with him personally. He ordered him to return there immediately. Ramsay was waiting for him, saying he would return right away. After they left the mansion, Denny said it was very nerve-wracking and asked. Ramsay asked if he was sure about the meeting with the Baron. Ramsay told him that now was the time to carefully watch the movements of his guardian. Finally, they reached Colin's trading company. When they stepped into that place, they saw it was full of people. Denny said that the noise here never stops, and Ramsay added that this place is considered one of the best trading firms in the city. He saw a group of people discussing something and told them that Anthony had sent him. Ashley, a merchant from Colin's trading company, raised his eyebrows in surprise upon learning that Anthony had introduced them, and asked if they had any business with his firm. Ramsay nodded and said he hoped to sell some wooden goods. Ashley carefully examined the quality of the goods and added that they are quite good. He said that the total would be 1,200 rubla. Ramsay thought it over, and that was that. When asked if they also trade rye, Ashley smiled and confirmed this is the famous Colin's Trading Company. Ramsay said that was wonderful and asked if they could exchange it for 3 barrels of rye. Danny inquired if he really did not want money instead. Ramsay replied that rye is his main goal, and it's better to exchange immediately for what you want than to lose money on commissions. Ashley thought for a moment, and Ramsay told him he was rushing a bit after that he had a meeting with Baron Darrell. Ashley could not believe it and asked him to stop joking, but Ramsay sincerely assured that he was not lying. He said, "If what I say is true, then I need 4 barrels of rye. If it is a lie, only 2. Then he turned to Ashley and asked what he thought, and Ashley thought to himself that for a merchant such a bet is a good deal in any case, so he agreed and said he was in the game. Ramsay told him to move on, and Ashley ordered his people to watch the cargo. They arrived at Darrell's estate, and Ashley said to Ramsay, "If you want to refuse, now is the last chance." Ramsay approached the gates. The guard recognized him and invited him inside. Ashley froze in shock at this, and Danny smiled looking at her. When they entered, Anthony met them and, quietly nodding, told Ramsay that he could go further, and his companions should wait in the room. Ramsay entered the dark room. There, in the semi-darkness, sat Darrell Hendrik. He sincerely said that he was glad to see Ramsay greeted him, apologizing for his clothes, and Darrell said, "Don't worry, make yourself at home." Ramsay sat opposite him, and Darrell said he would get straight to the point. He confirmed Ramsay's suspicion. There were troubling movements in the capital, and he intended to take advantage of this to expand his lands. Ramsay was shocked to hear this. He was going to use the ball as an excuse to ask Darrell for help, but instead of tricks, he just said it directly. He felt that trouble was brewing. Ramsay sat silently, and Darrell praised him. Silence is golden. He continued, saying that his target was Borden Baron in the west, and that he had arrived that day not just by chance. He even asked Ramsay to create a pretext for invasion. Ramsay was shocked. He calmed down and asked him what he would get out of it. Darrell asked him what he wanted, and Ramsay decisively replied land and money. Darrell explained that there could be immediate problems with the land, but he could prepare the money. He said that if everything succeeded, he would pay him 50,000 rubles. Ramsay added that he also wanted to buy his tax exemption, and Darrell agreed for 3 years. Ramsay thought to himself, if he managed to gain even a little financial freedom, it was not such a big deal. It was a bad deal, and at that moment it was almost impossible to refuse. If he was already going to poison the well, let him do it fully. Ramsay asked if it was just to create a pretext, and Daryl confirmed. Ramsay agreed and said that he had one more proposal. The scene shifted to Danny. He was a bit tipsy and was telling Ramsay that he and Ashley had talked a little. Ramsay noticed that Danny really had a great time. Danny explained that they kept bringing wine and dried meat. Ashley approached, sincerely apologized to Ramsay for doubting him, and said that, as promised, he would take care of 4 barrels of rye and lodging. Ramsay thanked Ashley and shook his hand, saying that he looked forward to cooperating with him, Ashley Easton, whoever he was. On March 2, Paul said that it was about it's time to act. He and his friends were already ready to carry out their plan. He announced to everyone that it was time to move out. One of his friends was glowing with joy that they were setting off, and Paul said, "The early bird catches the worm," adding that they would strike the base under the cover of night. Ivan got scared and told Paul that there was no need to rush last time Ramsay and others stole their harvest. Paul said that Ramsay changed his mind when he heard that they had alcohol supplies, and that alone was a good loot. Ivan thought to himself, Pavlo suddenly became too zealous, and he realized someone had influenced him. Behind their back stood a man in a dark hood, smiling. Paul told everyone to hurry up and get ready. Everyone obeyed him. At night, they walked through the bushes, and he said they should talk while they moved. He told them that Ramsay was holed up in the biggest house and they would strike there, but until then they must remain silent. One of them asked, "What's the plan?" Paul explained that they would set fire from all sides, and on that dead night, the fire would not go out quickly, the smoke would finish it off. One of them asked Paul, "If you yourself cannot kill him, is that okay?" Paul answered sharply, "As long as Ramsay is dead, that's all that matters." He said that those who overdid it themselves usually died young. The man in the hood laughed, called Paul brilliant, and said that it seemed he had a talent for leadership. One of Paul's workers asked who the man in the hood was, and Paul suddenly realized that his people were seeing this man for the first time. He introduced himself as Kit and said he could not say much, he was under the command of a noble lord. Paul smiled and said that he was finally lucky. His worker replied that if Paul said so, they trusted him. So that they do not forget to behave like bandits. Some time passed, and the night silence grew they. When they approached the village, the house of Ranji appeared before them. Someone among them asked Paul if this was the one, and Paul said there was no doubt about it. He ordered to light the torches, and fight to the end. They did so, and broke through the glow of the torches. Near the house, and suddenly it caught fire. The house caught fire, and Paul laughed seeing this. He shouted to Ramsay that this was his end. Other villagers ran outside and saw the fire was already blazing. One of the workers tried to scare the villagers, loudly shouting that this was not a show, whoever wants to live should run away. Danny and other soldiers came and began to ask what they were doing in their village. The workers looked and decided, weaklings. Paul told them to support Tony because he himself thought they could defeat them. Suddenly Ranji came out in armor with a sword and rushed at Paul. Paul managed to block, and he saw with surprise that Ramsay was still alive. He sharply pushed Ranji away, seeing that he was still alive. He asked him if he had found the lady and saved his own skin. Randy said it was sad and pathetic to think that it was his brother and that it could make him cry. Paul couldn't stand it and teased him in response. don't worry. When he was already about to make him cry blood. With a smile on his lips, he raised his sword and rushed at Ramsay. Ramsay managed to block and parry the blow. They both exchanged strikes. And thanks to Archibald's training, he could hold on, but there was too great a gap in strength between them. Ramsay fought while Paul sat relaxed. Ramsay knew that if it continued like this, it was the end for him, but he was not going to retreat. Thank you, and then Kit called Paul, telling him that this was exactly where it ended. When Paul asked why, Kit told him to look around, where he saw how most of his workers were captured. And two of his friends, Tony and Kun, Paul's younger brother, were dead. He turned pale from what he saw Danny, and others were still full of strength and ready to back up Ramsay. Kit told Paul that they were in a disadvantageous position, asked for permission to lead, and suggested regrouping and reassessing the situation. Paul had no other choice. He agreed and rushed away together with Kit. Danny ran to catch up, but Ramsay stopped him, saying it was unnecessary and that the fire needed to be controlled first. Charlie and other villagers brought some water and a few buckets. Ramsay told them that if they acted now, they could limit the damage to just the base, and ordered everyone to join Forge and extinguish that fire. Kit and Paul fled away, and Paul cursed Ramsay. He swore he would never forgive him. At Hendrik's estate, Ramsay was together with Danny and Osmo. All were splendidly dressed. Darrell appeared, apologizing to Ramsay for making him wait. Anthony also greeted Rugala Lord Khan, who came gloomy and completely confused. Darrell sat down. He continued, asking everyone present whether it was worth discussing the details. Ramsay briefly told about the recent attack on the village of Bartlett, and he addressed his father, Lord Rugal, asking if he had any objections or counterarguments. Hans was disappointed and sad, and it occurred to him, could it really be Paul asking Ramsay if he had any evidence? Ramsay, of course, told him this. All these attacks were carried out by the inhabitants of the village of Rugal. There were 6 of them: Paul, Kuhn, Tony, Ivan, John, and Tom. He said they captured 3 of them, so if he doubted, they could bring the prisoners here. Hans asked, what about the other 3? And Ramsay told him that Paul, the real mastermind of the operation, fled, abandoning everyone. Only 2 remained: Tony and the second son of the Rugal family, Kuhn. They were dead. He said Hans was simply shocked. He put his palm to his face, hiding his sadness, and told everyone he understood. Ramsay told him that he would later bring the bodies to his estate. Durrell smiled at this, having said that now is the time for judgment. He sharply told Rugal Khan that ignoring warnings and attacking allied territory is a serious crime. Even if it was done by his son, the father had to watch over him. He said he would not take his life, but would strip him of his title, take away his lands, and exile him. Hans agreed, and Darrell continued, saying that Lord Rangi Bartlett should not be blamed for defending his lands, and after that he stopped all the noise. Ramsay, from the window, saw his father leave in deep shame and sorrow. Danny sat down and said that standing before the border wasteland is terribly nerve-wracking. Ozma agreed. Ramsay then apologized to both when I was a child. Mazma asked what was the matter with this sudden proposal. Ramsay explained that he wanted to apologize for not communicating properly before, and told them that this whole incident. It turned out that it was a conspiracy between him and the Baron of the Borderlands. Then they rewound to the past. Ramsay met Darrell and said he had an idea. His brother Paul still had not given up trying to kill him, so he proposed to give Darrell his support, and Darrell was interested. Ramsay explained that, if he spread rumors that the Baron and Lord Borden did not like him, Paul would take the bait and attack Bartlett's lands. Darrell understood and said that by pretending to let him go, the Baron would trap him and himself become guilty of hiding the attack. He told Rangi that it was a good idea. He appointed his squire Keith as the messenger, gave the sign to Anthony to do it, and told Ramsay that he would inform him of the attack date in advance, and Ramsay needed to focus on defending the village. Turning back to the present, Ramsay finished explaining the situation, and Danny understood. He knew that an attack would happen that day. Ozma reassured that they managed to carry out the belongings, so the losses were minimal. Danny added that the burned base was supposed to undergo reconstruction anyway. Ramsay agreed, but admitted that he had let everyone down and apologized, to which Ozma said there was no need to apologize. Apparently, he decided that this was the best way out, and in the end, everyone was safe. Rangi was glad that his people trusted him so much. Just then, Darrell came out, praised Rangi, said he was doing well, and thanked him for his efforts. He continued introducing him to George, the general of his border army. Then he told him that they would now start preparing for a full-scale invasion, but before that, he handed out bags filled with rhubarb. He announced that these were the promised 50,000 rubara, and added, use them wisely. Danny and Ozma froze in shock seeing so much money, and Darrell said he had just received a message from Keith. It seemed Paul had safely reached Lord Borden, so they needed to plan the next step. Ramsay said that first, as agreed, he would formally join the Rugal territory to Bartlett Lance and ask him if he was sure everything was fine. Darrell said they would have to give him a reason to attack from that side, and if he believed that land rightfully belonging to him was taken away, he added, knowing that on that side were Ranji and Paul, who would not remain silent either. You will demand that Lord Borden hand over Paul, and if he refuses, you will have to resort to force. Ramsay asked what if the Baron simply agrees to give him up, and Darrell winked at Ramsay, saying he would make it so that the Baron would have no choice but to refuse. Darrell, of course, would demand a solid reward for sheltering Paul. Ramsay heard this and thought to himself that Darrell was a real clever one. And so March 8 arrived. Paul was waiting in Baron Borden's mansion. At that moment, a maid approached Paul and informed him that Lord Costello had summoned him. At the head of the Borden family stands Casella de Borden. They greeted him and Paul knelt, trying to pay him respect, but Casella stopped him. He said that the little church greeting he used in business was completely unnecessary. He asked Paul if he remembered the story he had recently told him. Paul said he remembered and added that the Baron demanded his safety. He thought to himself, how strange that even Baron Hendrik despises Ramsay. The cat never returned, so nothing could be confirmed. Casello confirmed this and promised compensation of 200,000 rubars. He tore up the paper in which Hendrik claimed that Lord Paul was the first to attack, and Paul's father would be held responsible, would be stripped of his title and exiled.
He asked where exactly one could find this stone.
He tore up the paper in which Hendrik was the first to attack. Stella continued, saying that he heard from a man named Kit that he was unfairly expelled because of his brother's rebellion, and therefore he protected him on his territory. Castell asked if he was lying. Paul said no, and the Baron was clearly looking for a pretext for invasion. Casella imagined as if that was exactly what was on his mind. He convinced himself that even if he agreed, refusal of compensation gave Hendrik full grounds to attack, and in any case he was coming out ahead. He said he also had to discuss this with Lord Gardel. It was March 12, and Ramsay was talking to Eric that to prepare for future attacks, he intended to build a new fortress. He was trembling over the drawing he made himself, explaining that he would dig up the plain, dig moats and embankments, put a watchtower on top, and surround everything with warehouses and housing enclosed by walls. He ordered Eric to gather the people of the village Rugal and start immediately, to which Eric replied that he would do what he could. Danny approached and asked if he was going to see his father. Ramsay agreed. He said he heard supposedly today he is managing the estate. Ramsay managed to catch up with his father Hans, just in time. Hans was sincerely glad that Ramsay came. He reassured him, all the necessary documents are in the office, the peasants are already informed, so there is no need to worry. He said that he never imagined that Ranji would be the one to take over, and all because he couldn't take care of him. Ranji asked what would happen to him and his mother from now on. He told them that if he had no leads he might stay with him. Hans interrupted him, stating that he had already been sentenced to exile, and if Ranji did not obey, his position would also be at risk. He told him that they were heading to the capital. His mother, Helena's brother, was in the palace and might be able to help them find a military position. Ramsay smiled as if with relief, but it was false. Hans apologized for not treating him properly until now. And despite this, he only caused problems. He said that Paul was not always cruel. Once, when Ranji was little, Paul took care of him. He asked if he remembered, and Ranji recalled childhood when his brother cared for him, and they were happy. And bitterly admitted that it was his own fault. He expected too much. He only hoped that he would expand this territory. He trained him harshly both in studies and martial arts. This is what came of it, and he painfully knew. It was also his responsibility and fault because he pressured too much. A silence hung between them for a moment. Hans opened the bag, handed Ramsay a sword, and said that it was for him, a sword passed down in their family, so he must take it. He gave it to him, asked him to take care of it, and at the same time called him his son. Ramsay shed a tear because of this. There was almost no connection between him and his father. He knew that he was a reincarnation, and, as the third son in this country, considered himself unnecessary to his father. Ramsay cried. He thought to himself, Hans really was his father. He remembered the time when he and his mother held him, and he watched them leave. March 15 came. Ramsay and others were digging near their base. The duties of the Lord weighed on him. He was stressed, because a mountain of matters he had to think about loomed before him. He urgently needed to finish the mod at Bailey Fortress and on the moat. Just then someone approached Ramsay and called him Lord. Before them stood a young boy named Johnny from Henderson. Ramsay asked what had happened, and Johnny replied that since Danny was tied up, he brought the message instead of him. He told him that a letter had come for him from Baron Hendrik from the borderlands. Ramsay opened the letter and immediately understood it was a summons. This shocked him, and he sternly ordered Eric to gather them all. Bring the carpenters from the village of Rugal and finish building the fort immediately. He asked Johnny to tell Danny that he was going to Henderson. Johnny agreed and asked about accompaniment, but Ramsay just smiled and said, "Don't worry. As soon as the fort is completed, weapons, armor, and food will be brought." He entrusted Johnny to arrange its preparation, and Johnny agreed. It was already night, and Ramsay, out of breath, reached Hendrik's residence. He explained to the guard that he hurried here, but it was already quite late. The guard smiled, told Ramsay that they were waiting for him, and asked him to enter. The maid would escort him. Ramsay threw down his things, a nice suit, and headed after his friend to Darrell's private room. He entered the room and apologized for making them wait. Darrell first introduced Ramsay to the other men in the room, and then vice versa introduced them to Ramsay. That bright guy turned out to be Gilbert, the heir of this Earl of Berkeley. And the guy who was sweating profusely turned out to be Oliver, the heir of Baron Lloyd. Ramsay shook their hands. It was nice to meet them. They responded likewise, and Darrell said that they had been friends since childhood and now would again give him their strength. Gilbert said that it was a toxic connection. That is why Darrell constantly dragged them into his troubles, and Oliver just waved his hand and agreed these reckless demands of Darrell were exhausting. Darrell finished with the pleasantries and said that they should return to the main topic. He solemnly showed them a letter from Baron Borden. Gilbert picked it up and read what was in it. The document clearly stated, the firstborn Paul is the one who primarily inherits the territory of Rugal. Paul is the legitimate heir, so the third son Ramsay must immediately return everything to him, and if he refuses, they will raise the entire army and take it by force. Ramsay said that this was a declaration of war and shameless greed. He said that with such differing opinions, they had no choice but to fight to resolve it, but the declaration of war removed all doubts. Earl Gardel clearly supported Baron Borden. Everyone insisted to her that Earl Gardel was one of the leading military families of the country, and Gilbert warned that they would have to prepare for serious losses. Darrell said this, but the claim of the entire army was outright lies. Ramsay was silent while Darrell explained, if the entire army attacks Bartlett's territory, it's the end for them, but if the Baron's land is left completely unguarded, the border army will definitely target it. Oliver said that this means they will attack with 300 soldiers, and Hendrik replied that it was roughly so. Ramsay thought to himself that even 300 was a nightmare in case of an attack, because it was almost as many as their own inhabitants. Gilbert then said that Baron Borden had at most about 500 soldiers, so if he sent 300 of them, his own lands would be almost empty. Oliver agreed and said that they would lure them into Baron's territory and suddenly cover them with all of Gardel's troops. Gilbert understood their plan, and Darrell said that if Count Gardel can mobilize 2,000 soldiers, leaving 500 on his lands, then another 1,500 are hiding in the baronial estates. Underestimating enemy forces means risking their complete destruction. Ramsay still stood silently, listening to the conversation. Oliver said that depending on the conditions on the battlefield, they need 3 times more forces to take a castle or fortress. Gilbert asked Darrell how many troops they could move, and he told him that he had 2,000, she had only 400, Jill 300, and Ramsay. But as soon as he began to speak, he stopped and said that they should not rely too much on their forces. Ramsay was a bit embarrassed by this. Jill counted it totaled 2,700, and then they could lay siege. They continued discussing, and Ramsay thought to himself that more than an hour had passed, and the conversation was going in circles. He knew he could not talk about military strategy, but he could not calm down. Should he just sit idly by, caught in the middle of this conflict? He tried to speak, and everyone noticed it. Darrell quietly asked what happened. He said that if they were stuck, they needed to rewind to the beginning of the conversation. This meant that Darrell and Baron Borden had interfered in his and Paul's struggle for succession, and both sides secretly hoped to snatch a piece of territory from each other. Confirming this, Ramsay turned to everyone and asked, "Who, in your opinion, will make the first move in this battle?" He tried to answer but could not. Ramsay explained that whoever takes the initiative this time will find themselves in a very difficult position. He continued, saying that since this conflict is over inheritance, the first target will be the territory of Bartlett. If Paul took the initiative and invaded, they could respond with the unstoppable force of the Borderlords' army. On the other hand, if they attacked the Baron's territory, Bartlett's lands and Borderlords would be vulnerable to raids. Gil and Oliver both agree with this, and Ramsay said so they should make a move. This confused everyone, and Gil asked him, "Didn't you just say that we are putting ourselves at a disadvantage?" Ramsay replied that he has a plan. If Darrell leads all the troops he can gather, his lands will remain undefended, so he asks him for only 50 soldiers with them. He will find a way to turn the tide of battles in Bartlett's lands. He will ask Daryl what he would do, and after thinking a bit, Daryl smiled and told Ramsay that he agrees. He said that for his money he would hire mercenaries and put them under Ramsay's command, and everything that happens will be Ramsay's responsibility. Ramsay agreed. Oliver then said that it is worth taking this as the basic plan, and thinking through the strategy, their conversation continued. On March 30, at Baron Borden's estate, the guard Pavlo appeared and said that Lord Costello had asked him to appear. Paul was glowing with excitement upon hearing this. Open the door and you will see the code. Stella talks with the head of the Gardel house, Ludwig von Gardel. Costello said that the young border lord is leading troops right here, about 3,000, so he raised almost his entire army. Costello told Paul that he trusts him with 200 of his soldiers so that he can go and restore order in his lands. Paul agreed, and Costello said he would appoint him an assistant so he should make good use of her. Paul thanked him and promised that he would definitely be useful. He dismissed everyone and Paul immediately set off. Putting on his gear, Paul smiled, saying this last. Now it was time to pass sentence on Ramsay. Just then he left the estate, and the captain of Baron Borden's army, Veronica, greeted him, saying she had been waiting for him, and she was assigned to come to the aid of this unit. Paul introduced himself and said they needed to prepare for battle. Veronica agreed. She shouted to all the troops, "Get ready." She told Paul that they should be ready to depart in about half an hour and asked which route they should take, advising to take the detour, but Paul rejected this suggestion. He said that the northern route risks encountering Hendrik's border patrols, and the southern route goes through Lord Dominic's lands and could cause misunderstandings with him. It would take more time and add dangers, so the mountains would be a better option. Veronica thought that there was sense in this, but knowing that there were many elderly soldiers in their part, she would rather choose a flat road than a steep rocky mountain path. She told Paul that she understood, and they would take the mountain route, but choose a relatively gentle path. Paul agreed and could not wait to show it to Ramsay. In Bartlett's holdings, Ramsay fixed the homemade device and it worked. He drew water from a nearby stream, built a food storage with earthen walls to withstand fire, and there were plenty of provisions, and just then a man approached Ramsay, called him chief, and said that everything was ready there. This man was the leader of the mercenary group, Black Eagle's Hawk. Ramsay thanked him and asked how the negotiations with Danny were going, and Hawk replied calmly, "So far there are no problems. He will bring Danny and others under their Black Eagle banner." He said that usually it would make sense to join mercenaries to the regular army, but the regular troops were hastily assembled, so he could not so easily risk the lives of his people. Ramsay agreed. The best thing is to give leadership to the hardened mercenaries. He told him not to waste the regular troops. Hawk laughed and sharply replied to Ramsay that he should tell that to the enemy himself. At that moment Johnny ran up and excitedly informed Ramsay that the weapons were already ready. Ramsay inquisitively asked Johnny how many arrows they had, and Johnny dryly replied about 200. Ramsay the news. There turned out to be too few of them, and Johnny was told to wait a second. He told Hawk that he wanted to stock up on arrows, wanted the soldiers to gather branches for reconnaissance, and asked him for permission. Hawk told him that it was fine with him. Ramsay thanked him and said he would go give a few orders. He looked at him with interest, thinking that Ramsay was still young, but a lord nonetheless, and still consulted with him before moving the troops. Even if he knew it, carrying it out was another matter. He smiled and said that here one could really work well. It was March 31 in America. The messenger ran into the village, shouting, and woke everyone up. Hawk asked what was happening, and the messenger said he had spotted about 200 enemy soldiers somewhere halfway up the Beverly Mountains. Hawk was disappointed to hear this. He had heard they would have to fight 300. He said it would be a trifle, and Ramsay remarked that losing due to negligence was by no means funny. Danny asked the messenger how long until the battle. The messenger said that the enemy detachment was also resting, so the earliest they would be seen was in an hour, and the latest in 3. Denny ordered the messenger to retreat and rest. He lived in constant anxiety. And just at that moment, Hawk kicked me in the side, who told him that if he is so tense now, he won't survive the real battle. He told him to bring the soldiers to readiness because he was counting on him, and called his surgeon. Denny listened and left. Ramsay asked Hawk what he thought, and if they had any chance, and Hawk replied that they had enough people. But they won't know until they try. Ramsay said that his uncertainty strangely calmed him. Denny returned and told Hawk that he had ordered the soldiers to prepare for landing. Hawk replied that a final check was needed. He loudly told everyone that he would take the main command. Denny had 20 regular fighters, and Ramsay commanded 10. He decisively said that he would take command of the remaining 50 mercenaries they brought, and ordered them to follow general orders, leaving everything else to their discretion. Ramsay said that no matter how many times he heard it, the plan was still too vague, and Hawk reassured, "Don't worry, that flank will hold the enemy only with mercenaries," and he was confident they wouldn't do anything foolish. He said it was time for them to start. Pavlo and his squad have arrived, and he even held his breath, seeing the fortress that had grown in such a short time. Veronica approached and told him that the fortress bridge was already raised, so to break through, they would have to build another bridge or cross the moat. Paul asked her what they should do. Veronica said she had heard that there were no experienced soldiers there, so maybe it was worth the risk, and it seemed their reinforcements had not yet arrived. Paul understood and said they would move forward as planned. When they moved forward, Paul sharply stopped them and commanded, "Line up from here." At that very moment, an arrow whistled past Paul's face. The arrow almost hit him. He stunnedly ordered his soldiers to retreat a little and move away from the fortress, wondering how the arrows could reach them from such a distance. He looked at the giant tower and wondered if it could be the cause. At the very top of the tower, Ramsay stood with an archer and, smiling, said that the range was more than enough. Arrows flew farther when shot from height, and at that height, 3 people already the limit. Accuracy dropped. It was enough just to arrange a hail of projectiles. He shouted to the soldiers below, "This is their chance." Paul was terribly disappointed because of this. He said that Ramsay mocks them. Veronica tried to calm him down, but he ordered his soldiers to rush forward and bring Ramsay's head. The archers knocked their arrows. Hawk said, "Not yet, wait until they get close enough to shoot." After a few moments, he gave them the order, and a rain of arrows fell upon the soldiers. Danny shouted to keep shooting and not let them approach the fortress. Hawk asked Danny where Ramsay was, and Danny replied that they were on guard to avoid an ambush from the rear and inside, and Hawk praised him, saying he was clever. Soldiers were falling left and right. Veronica shouted to Paul that they would be easily destroyed, so they needed to retreat.
He knew she would have unhesitatingly lent a hand, but he decided to manage on his own first.
They retreated into the forest, and Veronica told him that in the first battle they lost 50 men together, so they did not have enough troops to surround the fortress. Paul asked her if there was any good plan. She told him that the classic move was a night raid. Paul asked her if she really thought it would work. After thinking a little, she said that it would be so. She said that for now it was worth retreating. Their data about the Bartlett territory turned out to be false, and with the current forces it was practically impossible to break that fortress. Paul agreed and thought, what if we bypass the fortress and attack the village? But he immediately corrected himself. The village and Rugala's territory belonged to him, so robbing them would make no sense. Paul said that he needed at least one night to think everything over. At night, a sharp noise woke Veronica. It was Hawk and his mercenaries, who were shouting at the soldiers that their judgments were too soft, and asking if they really thought that a night raid would not be arranged against them. Veronica shouted to the soldiers not to panic. "There are many of us. Stay together." Hawk heard this and said that if they stayed together, they would end up losing. He ordered his mercenaries to raise a commotion and then retreat. In the camp, Gokar turned around. Ramsay praised him for this, and interested, asked what exactly they had noticed in the enemy camp. Hawk told him that they were already at nothing. Morale was falling, and soon everything would collapse, and Ramsay then ordered Hawk to tell the soldiers to rest a little. Just as they were about to move out for the morning attack, Danny came in and asked if it was really necessary. Ramsay, with a stone face, said that if they were going to do it at all, they had to strike with all their might. Danny was worried, and Hawk was casually calm. Randy knew that he had to settle the score with Paul here, and his determination had already begun to pressure Paul. Hawk said he understood Danny's anxiety, but rash steps could have already resulted in great losses, although they would probably retreat soon. So they needed to hit hard when they were leaving. He said his squad and Ramsay's would chase them, and Danny would hold the fort. That morning, April 2, a messenger came to Ramsay with news. The enemy was already beginning to prepare for retreat. Hawk ordered the soldiers to prepare for assault, asked if they had rested well, and heard a resolute yes. He told Danny that he was going to. Lord's squad was probably already nearby. They would deal with them first, then disperse, and Danny agreed. They gathered the soldiers and led them forward. Hawk finally noticed them and indicated that it seemed about 30 remained. Veronica stood bravely and confidently, and nearby her comrades in arms. Hawk barked, "Danny, Ramsay's and the others, do not spare them. Cut without hesitation and look only at the enemy ahead." He ordered them to attack, and they all rushed forward, frightening Veronica's force. Hawk ordered them to surrender and promised to spare their lives, then added, "Whoever does not want to die, drop your weapons." Many of Veronica's soldiers surrendered and begged Hawk to spare their lives. Veronica was shocked to see this. Hawk said they were safe and informed Ramsay that they were moving forward. Ramsay said his squad would be on site any moment. When he turned around, he noticed Veronica. She was still standing her ground and shouting at the soldiers not to come closer. She would fight to the end. Ramsay recognized her and shouted to the soldiers to retreat. He introduced himself to Veronica as the commander of that army and said he saw she was a famous commander. Veronica introduced herself as the captain of Baron Borden's squad and said she would like to talk to him. Rans apologized and said he could not agree to a one-on-one duel. He would rather she surrender quietly and guaranteed her safety. Ramsay thought to himself, she still did not retreat after that quite a troublesome opponent, and while they were fussing, they could escape together with Paul. He told Danny that they were switching roles, they would defend the fort, so he should go support Hawk. Danny understood and gathered his squad to rush in pursuit of Hawk. Renzi quietly said he could give her as much time as needed, but asked only to look around for a moment. She saw that only defeated soldiers and corpses remained around. He told her that she had no chance against him. Veronica, pressing her lips, reluctantly agreed and gave up. When Danny's squire caught up with Hawk, he saw that he had already stopped fighting. Hawk told him that the enemy commander managed to escape, and now they could do nothing. In that battle, Paul's troops under the command of Baron Borden were defeated, including the dead among the fugitives. Only 20 soldiers remained, and Paul himself barely escaped and reached the capital of the wasteland. Boston and the first battle ended with a decisive victory for Bartlett's army. At the very border between the territory of Baron Borden and the land of Count Hendricks, Gilbert was sitting astride a horse among the soldiers and ordered his comrades to preserve their lives for now, just hold this stalemate. He thought that Darrell said it, but those 3 days of uncertainty dragged on, and he doubted if everything was really okay. At that moment, a soldier approached and informed Gilbert that a messenger had just arrived from Bartlett territory. Gilbert said he would drop by to see Darrell. When he entered the tent, he saw Darrell and Oliver there and asked what was happening in Bartlett. Oliver replied that he was glad to see him. Darrell informed them that the messenger brought news. Ramsay and his team achieved a complete victory. Gilbert rejoiced and said that Ramsay is not a coward. He asked what to do next, and Oliver said he was keeping the Baron's troops pinned there to prevent reinforcements from arriving. Suddenly Darrell laughed loudly, confusing Oliver and Gilbert. He said that the current state of affairs would have stunned Gilbert. He explained that they would attack only enough to press the enemy and keep him down, without trying to take the fortress. The scene shifted to Ramsay. He raised his glass and proposed a toast to this victory. Everyone raised their cups and shouted together, celebrating the victory. Denny approached Ramsay and asked what they would do next. Ramsay told him that everything depends on Gawk. Gawk was drunk and joked that he was the chosen one. Ramsay inquired about the future, how the Black Eagle Corps was doing, and if they were still ready to move. Hawks replied that yes, and that he would continue to row profits. Ramsay smiled and said that he wanted to immediately ask for the next task, shocking Hawk. After some time, he approached Veronica. Her hands were tied and bound, and he asked if she was all right, and she shouted at him, "If you're going to kill me, just do it, and that's it." Ramsay ordered her to calm down. He was not going to kill her yet. Then he asked, when she said she was a captain, whether it was her ability or something that arose on its own. Veronica waved him off. If he was not going to kill her, then at least he could take her prisoner and do whatever he wanted with her. Ramsay saw that she was not listening to a single word he said, and thought that he would just have to wait until she calmed down. When he was about to leave, he suddenly heard her stomach growl, and asked if they could come to an agreement. After some time, he untied her ropes and gave her something to eat. He quietly asked her if she would tell him about herself. She introduced herself, Veronica. She was 20. She was a captain under Baron Borden. She said she was born from the head of the trading company Mossman and his concubine in the territory of Warden. Ramsay learned that she was from a good family and told her that he would demand ransom from Baron Borden, then she would be free as a bird. Veronica smiled sadly and said that the Baron would not pay the ransom, nor would her father Mossman. Most of them would rather spend money on some things than pay for her. Ramsay understood that this complicates the matter. Keeping her captive would be expensive, and Veronica said that she was ready as a soldier and suggested that he could sell her to a slave trader. She asked her if she wanted to become a slave, and she got angry, addressing him. "Don't be ridiculous, who would want to be a slave anyway?" Then he asked her what she wanted to do. This question almost brought her to tears. She whispered that she really just wanted to go home. Ramsay said that makes sense and stood up. He promised to do everything he could to get her home. Veronica was stunned by his kindness. The scene shifted to a meeting between Mossman, head of the Mossman Trading Company, and Costello. Mossman said with a bitter smile that they were in real trouble and asked if that was Lord Paul from the Marcus family, who lost spectacularly and fled in disgrace. And and Costello praised him, saying, "You still have sharp hearing." Losing 200 soldiers turned out to be a catastrophic mistake. He told him that Paul was now under house arrest there. Mosman said that Count Gardel's reinforcements numbered 1,500 people, so no amount of gold would help here. Cassel looked at him more relaxed. Mosman asked what brought him today, and Costello pulled out a letter, saying that a swift horse had just arrived with a request from General Holland at Fort Code. They said that Veronica and 20 more people were captured in Bartlett territory. To get them back, a ransom had to be paid. Mosman said he would live to see the day when Costello would pay like a lord, and Costello, apologizing, explained, "You can't take anything from empty pockets, and now because of Paul he has to pay financial aid to 180 soldiers' families." They both looked intently at each other. The Muslim said that if they abandoned the prisoners, it would look bad on him as the ruler. Casella said there was no need to worry, they could just pretend they knew nothing, and that was why he sent a disgraced soldier on this mission. He thought Veronica was a different matter. She had made her way through hard work, not family connections, and he doubted he could pay the ransom for Masman's daughter. Mossman said they had no choice but to surrender. Casella was surprised by this. When asked if he meant he would not pay the ransom, Masman replied that his trading company had already borrowed so much, and his own pockets were worn to the thread. Casella struggled with herself to Masman, she was just an illegitimate child. Suddenly a soldier burst through the door. Costello said they had guests and anxiously asked what was happening. The soldier replied it was an urgent message and that the village of Ease in the east was under attack. Costello asked in shock if the Borderlord's army had moved. The soldier firmly denied it, reporting that the enemy was Bartlett's army, and Costello simply could not believe it. The army of Bartlett was commanded by Hawk. He ordered the soldiers to burn the village to the ground and take everything, not worrying about the fugitives, and to loot as much as they could. Ramsay told them that the village, right at the foot of the Beverly Mountains, belonged to the Baron, so he wanted Hawk and the others to strike first. Hawk told the others that after they grabbed the food and valuables there would be ski-daddle, so no dawdling, and then he saw the worried Danny and calmed him down. He warned him, watch carefully, this was war. He told him that he usually took the peasants back, especially young women and children, but not this time, not out of pity, simply they would become a burden. He asked Danny if he understood, and Danny nodded. He slapped himself on the face to focus, and resolutely told the soldiers that it was time to retreat. Hawk thought that it would be hard for Danny, but he had to be ready to lead the troops in the future, and at least he was glad that the first battle was not a complete defeat. The scene shifted to the general of Baron Borden's army. Holland he got angry when the messenger said that Borden wanted him to withdraw the troops from the front. He shouted that it was impossible, and asked what was going on in Baron Borden's head. He said that their troops were exhausted from relentless attacks, and they still did not know what the border lords wanted. The messenger warned him, if this continued, the enemy from the east would ravage their lands. Holland asked the messenger how many troops he needed, and he replied about 300. Holland thought it was not a disaster, but anything could happen. Holland agreed to send 200 soldiers, and the messenger, although saying he understood his situation, insisted on sending the troops immediately. Holland sighed irritably and could not understand what Count Hendrik was planning. The scene shifted to Gilbert and Darrell. Jill asked him how much longer he intended to drag out this stalemate. Darrell decisively told him to stop talking nonsense and added that he would hold on until they won, of course. Gilbert got angry and sharply asked if they could even win at all, and Oliver tried to calm him down. Darrell asked him what he thought, and Oliver replied that there was no need to panic yet. The longer it dragged on, the more expensive it would be, so they needed to conserve supplies. Darrell said he had stocked up just in case, and at that moment, a soldier entered their tent and quietly whispered something to Darrell. When he finished, Darrell said that it seemed everything was going better than expected, and ordered him to prepare for a full-scale attack. In Bartlett's holdings, a messenger brought Ramsay news. Darrell ordered them to continue reducing enemy troops at the same pace, and Ramsay told Hoku and Danny that the Count still intended to devastate the village. Grady urgently called Darrell, and Danny looked uncertain. Randy said that this time it would not go so smoothly. A defensive force had been sent. They had already taken the nearest village, Asa, so he said to target Mocha, Pina, or Toto. The enemy would definitely be waiting in the neighboring villages. Denny asked where they were supposed to aim at all. After all, they could not defeat everyone at once. Ramsay recalled how to deceive the enemy and suggested deliberately striking the capital, Boston. Denny froze in shock and Hawk laughed. Interesting idea, but unrealistic. Their own losses would be too serious. Hawk suggested to me the second largest city. Denny said he had heard it is the trade center of the barony and would be hard to break into, so he asked if it was not dangerous, and Hawk replied that they would make a fuss there and then attack the village of Gaw. And at that very moment, Veronica sharply challenged them. Puzzled, they asked her what had happened. She asked to at least discuss the strategy in another room and reproachfully asked who they took her for. Rangi laughed, apologized, and said that this fortress could not afford any concessions. He asked her what she thought about the movement of the Baron's army. Veronica, with a cheeky smile, asked if he really thought that she, a soldier of the enemy, would answer that. Ramsay told her that there was still no news from the enemy base. Veronica looked sad and disappointed. They left the room, and Ramsay told Denny that the plan needed to be refined and executed that same night, and Denny asked not to rush, and Ramsay agreed. He said he thought it would all be settled. The elite of the Black Raven Brigade created a diversion. 200 reinforcements of the Baron's army rushed to suppress them, while the main forces of Erlet attacked the village of Gaw on the opposite side. Then Count Hendrik's Forge, fully prepared, began his full-scale offensive. Castle asked his minister if the battle was currently going on exactly like that.
The gargoyle replied that it was difficult for humans, but possible for dragons. Then Cillier asked to be turned into part of the wall himself. The gargoyle nodded, and in a moment Cillier's body merged with the stone, becoming invisible.
Estella hesitated about what to do, whether to ask Count Gardel for reinforcements or not, but quickly dismissed the idea. Even if they were sent, they would arrive too late, and meanwhile the village was already burning. He ordered the minister to send a peaceful envoy to Count Hendrik. On April 5, at Fort Coddural, and Ramsay met Costello in Holland. It was then that negotiations for peace began between the four parties. Ramsay noticed Baron Borden, and next to him General Holland, a respected representative of Count Gardel. Suddenly he saw soldiers restraining Pavlo. Borden was the first to speak. He apologized for this conflict and sincerely regretted it, as did they. It was tenderly embraced by Paul. Durrell smiled and said that he could only imagine the storm in his heart, but it did not concern them. He told them directly. The truth was that they repeatedly rejected their requests and mobilized their forces. Warden asked him what exactly he meant. And Darrell explained that he would like to recognize the Gorda Plain as part of the possessions of his border lords. And as for the compensation, 200,000 rubella seemed quite fair. Holland stopped him. I once again emphasized that this war erupted due to a misunderstanding, and asked him, had he gathered evidence and directly challenged Baron Borden, this could have been avoided. Ramsay thought that Holland was indeed right, and that Lord Border deliberately refrained from military actions. He said that Lord Rugal was his vassal, so his son should be handed over without delay, and those who abandon their affairs should not dictate terms. Holland replied that if we are to talk about responsibility, then Hendrik, the Lord of the Border, is to blame for poorly managing his vassal, and asked how he intended to answer for this. Ramsay realized they had reached a dead end, and asked Baron Borden what compensation he considered fair. The overseer said that 50,000 rubles as compensation was quite reasonable. Darrell got angry, stood up, and said that the negotiations were broken off. He ordered the guard to send a fast horse to Gilbert at the front line and commanded the entire army to immediately launch an attack. Holland stalked him. Holland mentally decided that resuming the fight under such conditions was absurd. Without enough soldiers and worthy commanders, the fort would inevitably fall. He wondered if not only the Baron cared about the army and finances, and told Darrell that he understood, and said that this must be decided at the plain of Gorda session. The order was shocked by this, and Darrell said that this alone was enough. Holland stated that the compensation would be 50,000 rubella. Darrell reduced it to 150,000, but Holland agreed to make it a clean 100,000. He told Darrell to finish this on behalf of both. Darrell agreed and asked if Baron Borden was satisfied. Borden agreed, and Holland smiled. They decisively said that this agreement must be signed, and a ceasefire declared. At that very moment Ramsay asked them to wait a little, and said that he had not yet finished the negotiations. Everyone froze in surprise. Darrell laughed, and Holland called him a little brat. He said that he was not welcome there. Rance said that was funny, as if this war arose from some misunderstanding. They made Nat the one who was attacked first, as if he was the biggest victim of all, and at the same time he claimed that he was not invited to the negotiating table. Holland was left speechless, and Ramsay sharply asked how exactly he intended to fix this. After a brief moment of silence, Holland said he would personally give Paul the root of all this, and they would settle it peacefully. Ramsay and Paul exchanged a glance. Rance told him that he would not need it. He stunned both Holland and Borden. He convinced himself he was not a warrior but a lord, so he valued practical benefit above honor. Paul's capture had no value for his people, so he could not agree to such an offer. The watchman was not satisfied with the mere fact that Paul had devastated their lands, and Ramsay explained that it was the mercenaries hired by the border baron, so unfortunately, he would not see any rubella. Ramsay thought to himself, this is only a half-lie. Shares in Hawk's Black Caring Group were settled before the conflict began, but he knew it was not wise to be too frank here. Borden then said that Ramsay could take the Beverly Mountains entirely, and that should be enough. Ramsay asked if he could also take the foothills, but Borden refused, only the mountains. Ramsay thought to himself that this looked like a decent compromise. Ramsay told them that if they could give him a written agreement that they would not be responsible for landslides or anything similar, then they, Borde, agreed. Ramsay raised the issue of ransom for the captured Captain Veronica and her 20 subordinates, but he dismissed it indifferently and quickly saying that if he did not return the prisoner, then so be it. Ramsay was shocked, and that was that. And they told him that everyone wanted to return, and asked, isn't the captain invaluable to his army? The administration explained, it was impossible to pay reparations immediately, so they could not pay the ransom either. Ramsay realized that he could not expect support from Veronica's father or the Muslim trading company. Holland sighed and said that if they had reached an agreement, they needed to sign a truce. Darrell and Borden signed the paper and firmly shook each other's hands. Darrell told Ramsay that he was returning to the front line and ordered him to return command to his territory. Ramsay agreed. Holland asked Costello what would happen to Paul, and Costello ordered to get rid of him. Renzi looked at his brother and said goodbye in his thoughts. Paul bit his lip, accepting defeat. That day on the plains of Horda, only one abandoned corpse remained. Turning into Bartlett's territory, Danny gladly greeted him and said with a smile that they did it. Ramsay insisted that he said nothing, but Denny asked if the war was over and Ramsay answered, yes. Denny left saying he had to report to everyone about their victory. Hawk came and asked about the terms of the truce, and Ramsay explained that the Baron had given up the Gordian Plains and handed over 100,000 rubella, and in return received only the Beverly Mountains. Hawk said that it should be roughly like that, and handed him the list of loot. After reading a bit, Ramsay said he would take the food, fabrics, and some iron, and let Hawk take all the other valuables. Hawk nodded, called him a smart commander, and replied that this option suited him. He left, saying that he would settle everything now, and told him that the lady was waiting for him in his room. When Ramsay entered his room, he saw Veronica waiting for him, and she literally lit up with joy. But looking at his face, she realized that it didn't work out for her, and said that everything was fine, because she knew that it would happen that way. She lay down on the bunk and whispered to him, you can kill or sell me as you please, sir. Do you want to enjoy my body instead? Ramsay looked at her and asked if she was going to join him. Veronica was quite surprised by this. Ramsay said that he could not bear the thought of selling her, so he wanted her to serve him as a vassal. Veronica refused. Her subordinates are here, and she cannot save herself by turning them into sleeves. Ramsay smiled and offered her two options. If she refused, he would sell all the slivers, and if she agreed to work there, he promised to release the other prisoners. Veronica looked at him emotionally. She said goodbye to her family, then fell to her knees before him, introduced herself as Veronica, and swore loyalty to Sir Bartlett. Ramsay drew his sword and touched her shoulder, a sign that she was appointed. Another, rejected as unnecessary, joined the ranks. He celebrated his victory with others by throwing a loud party. Ramsay came and saw that everyone was having a great time. Eric invited him to join, but Ramsay refused and promised he would catch up with them later. Several days passed since the peaceful negotiations took place on the Gotha Plains. The crisis passed and a celebration was held in the territory. Despite Paul's bad reputation as the Rugal Hare, the union with Bartlett territory went smoothly. They had to line up, many people did so, and Ramsay rejoiced, seeing this, thinking to himself that they had won and preserved those smiles. His hand was still trembling. It was his first battle. The battles turned out to be more terrible than he thought. It was a world unimaginable after his quiet past life. But step by step, he had to move forward and continue fighting to protect this territory. Because it was his duty as a lord, and at that very moment Johnny appeared clearly drunk. He sincerely thanked Ramsay for the cast, and in response heard that it was all because of his efforts, and Johnny promised to continue doing everything possible. And Ramsay told him, enjoy, what Johnny asked if he was going to get drunk. Ramsay waved it off, a mountain of work ahead. Returning to his office, he saw a pile of tasks. He needed to inspect the acquired mountain lands, but he decided to entrust this to Rogers and the lumberjack crew. It was necessary to start sowing as soon as possible. Obtaining any food supplies was difficult, so a large granary needed to be built, and soldiers trained for the future. At that very moment, Danny came and asked if he was still working on such a day. Danny handed Ramsay a glass and, smiling, said it was a victory celebration, so he had to drink with them. Ramsay nodded in agreement and began to drink. Danny was glad that they had survived it. Ramsay agreed. They insisted that they really had it, and he owed a lot to Danny. Danny told him to stop and added that they were almost there. They both looked out the window and saw that all the residents were happy. Danny said it was hard, but he was glad they fought. Ramsay agreed, and Danny set off, shouting for him to come by later. Ramsay was glad that Danny came to check if he was okay. To him, he looked out the window and saw two children singing and waving to him, and said they would do their best and preserve that view for the future. On April 21, Ramsay was about to go out and wanted to ask Veronica, was she ready? She threw at him, they transported 6 barrels of cash, and my people are already ready for the skirt. Ramsay thanked her, and she asked if that was all they were going for at the Hendos. Ramsay waved it off, saying first they needed to greet Daryl. Ramsay came to the Hendricks estate, and Daryl greeted him. Ramsay congratulated him on the victory. Daryl said it was all thanks to his efforts, and Ramsay just smiled and replied that he was too kind. He told Daryl that he had to go, he had important matters. So when he was already about to leave, Daryl called and asked to come by that night. Ramsay was embarrassed by that. He met Veronica on the street. She greeted him warmly. When they were leaving, Veronica looked at the crowd near the mansion and said that the border lord's estate was simply overcrowded. Ramsay explained that after the victory in the war and the expansion of the holdings, many merchants and nobles now try to gain favor, added that he was ordered to drop by earlier, and asked her if she had any idea why, and she replied that she didn't really know. They went into Colin's trading company, and Ashley immediately noticed him. Ramsay called him rude, and Ashley apologized and asked what had happened that day. Ramsay said he believed with the wine they made on their land, he could persuade him. Ashley took the bottle and tried the wine. He asked Ramsay how much he thought he could sell the wine for. Ramsay replied about 3 to 5 rubella, and Ashley said he considered it worth about 3 rubella, so they were buying for a rubella per cup. He saw that Ramsay brought it in a large barrel, and said they could add some color and sell it for 2,000 per barrel. Ramsay thought and said that this time it was not necessary, like last time, to turn everything into cash, and asked if they had a weaving loom among the livestock. Ashley nodded. Everything was there. Loom 3,000 rubella, goats 4,000, chickens 3,000. Randy suggested exchanging a couple of chickens and a weaving loom for 4 barrels of wine. He thought to himself that asking for a discount of 1,000 rubella was a bit too much. Ashley asked about the other 2 barrels, and this stunned Ramsay. Ashley said that if he was going to sell those barrels, he would give him 1 weaving loom and a rooster with 2 hands so he could buy all 6. Ramsay agreed that the amount was the same, but asked why. Ashley anxiously explained that the sales figures for that quarter looked worrying. Ramsay heard this and readily agreed to the deal, saying that the price suited him. Ashley blossomed with joy, said it would help them, and left, promising to arrange everything immediately. At that very moment, Veronica sneaked up and whispered into Ramsay's ear. He flinched in fright. He told her not to whisper like that into his ear, and she apologized. She asked him if it suited him, and admitted that if she had bargained better, she could have gotten better terms. Ramsay said that might be true, but in the future, most likely, he would rely on Colin's trading company. Thus a mutual concession was reached, and Veronica agreed, adding that connections with traders are important. Ashley came, apologized for making them wait, and promised that by tomorrow morning he would settle everything and prepare a few young lively hens, asking him to drop by before he headed home. They left, and Ashley waved goodbye to them. He told Veronica that the soldiers who were with them would get a free night, and asked her. She replied that she would go with him because she was his security partner. Ramsay noticed that she was completely different. Her attitude had changed compared to the time when she was captive. He asked her if they should return to the border lord's estate. He hoped they would not throw any unjustified demands at him. He came to the estate and saw that it was full of people. Ramsay and Veronica both flinched. He suddenly realized that this was a victor's party and could not understand what the borderlord was thinking inviting a person like him to such an event. I saw people of the higher world talking among themselves. It was then that Daryl approached and said he was glad to see him, told him not to rush and to enjoy himself. Veronica was uneasy, and she told Ramsay that she was not used to such places. Ramsay shoved a hot dog into her mouth. He told her that he could not read Daryl's intentions, but since it was a party, there was no need to worry about the surroundings, just enjoy the delicious food. They both ate with pleasure, and then announced that Daryl would speak. He went on stage, thanked everyone for coming for the sake of such an inexperienced person as himself, and said that this victory was the merit of all present and his outstanding comrades. He said he would like to sincerely express his gratitude and thank them. First, he mentioned Gilbert of the Berkeley family and said that he bravely fought on the front line, taking down many enemy soldiers. Then he thanked Oliver of the Loy family and added that he took on logistics and arranged supplies from the rear. And finally, he mentioned Ramsay. Bartlett firmly declared that he himself was the true hero of that victory. Ramsay shuddered at the unexpected mention of himself. Daryl said that Ramsay laid out for them a carefully verified picture of the entire battle, and without him, they would never have been able to ensure Gord's plan. Ramsay sat awkwardly while Daryl ordered everyone to give him the highest praise. Gilbert and Oliver burst out laughing at this, and Veronica sweetly clapped her hands for him. He called all three onto the stage. They came out. Ramsay suddenly became nervous before the speech. Gilbert delivered a lively and good speech, and when they finished, finally Ramsay was called. Ramsay thought to himself that he just needed to finish this quickly, without making a scene, and remain as inconspicuous as possible. He took the floor and introduced himself Ramsay Bartlett. He said that this victory belongs to Duke Hendrik and also to Lords Gilbert and Oliver. He apologized for his shortcomings and said that he had been working hard on himself to help Daryl even better. The speech exhausted him. After it, he felt unwell. Veronica noticed this, approached the maid and whispered that her master was feeling unwell and she wanted to help. She asked if they could find a room for them, and the maid allocated them a private room. Ramsay sighed heavily and said what a mess he had gotten into. Veronica asked confusedly, "Isn't it good that Duke Hendrik and the other nobles recognized him?" Ramsay explained that right now, the royal family is divided between the camp of Duke Agnes, and the faction of Prince Amel and Duke Agnes supports the Baron. So he was forced to publicly declare himself a supporter of Baron Hendrik, and thus of the Duke's faction, while he insisted that he never intended to take the side of either party. He realized that what was done could not be changed, and thought, to maintain balance, he would have to establish connections with the princess's faction. At dawn, he left the estate. Anthony asked in surprise if he was really leaving so early, and Ramsay nodded and warmly thanked him for letting him stay overnight. He asked to send his greetings to Daryl. Anthony nodded, understood, and added that he should come at any time. He was an invaluable companion to them, and Ramsay awkwardly thanked him. As they were leaving, they met Ashley. She greeted them, asked if he was ready, and said that he needed to return it immediately. Ramsay agreed the place was creepy, and he wanted to go home. Ashley understood that it was about yesterday's victory party, said that it seemed his lord was there too, and everyone was already whispering about Ramsay. They knew he was his guest, and were nervously panicking, and Ramsay noticed that rumors about him were already spreading throughout the city. Ashley prepared a cart with everything that was promised and discussed. Ramsay thought that they needed to develop these lands as much as possible before they got stuck in some other troubles, and asked Veronica what she suggested to do to increase the village population. She pondered and said that either they needed to encourage marriage or buy sleeves, and Ramsay realized it all comes down to making money. On April 30, Danny and Eric excitedly saw that Ramsay was creating a new dream. Ramsay explained that he wanted the two of them to try it. Eric asked if it was different from fast, and Ranji said that he planned to make a drink stronger than K-Fast, so he decided to let them try it first. Eric and Danny took a sip from the glass they were given and suddenly felt a sharp, strong sting inside. They asked what it was, and Ramsay said that the drink was 10 times stronger than Class, and they said he should have put it on them first. Eric exclaimed that this drink was just crazy, and Danny said he was trying it for the first time and asked what kind of drink it was. Ramsay explained that this is called whiskey. It is made from processed and fermented rye, then distilled to extract the alcohol. Danny suddenly realized that's why Ramsay later bought copper and glassware in the city. Correct, Ramsay asked how it tastes, and he replied, "Delicious." Eric tried to take another glass. Ramsay threw them both out. They were banging on the door and shouting that they just wanted a sip. Ramsay thought it was all about quantity. He didn't get even 1/120th part of the mash he prepared, and understood a more efficient distillation method was needed. Just then Veronica ran in, pushing Eric and Danny aside, and informed Ramsay that a messenger of Baron Hendrik had arrived. The messenger looked at Ramsay and asked if he was Lord Bartlett. Ramsay confirmed. The messenger threw a letter at him and said it was a message from Count Hendrik's office, so he should read it. The courier left, and Veronica indignantly remarked that he was very rude. He didn't even dismount from his horse. Ramsay suggested that maybe he lacked some authority. He opened the letter and began to read. Veronica asked what was written there. When Ramsay finished reading, he said, he immediately ordered Veronica to intensify training from then on and said that this was a summons. The scene changed. Before us was the head of the Morris family, Morris von Dodd, a mysterious man, and suddenly a man in a dark hood bowed before him, saying it was a great honor to meet Count Morris. Morris called him Lord Licht and invited him to drink and chat. Licht refused, saying he didn't drink much, but Morris insisted, don't hold back. Just then a beautiful woman approached, grabbed his drink, and said she would drink it herself. Morris praised her, said she drank well, and asked her name. She told him, I am Pamela, and added that she was pleased to be near him. Morris was tipsy and happy. Pamela came to him, settled in his arms, and calmed him. Licht asked Morris if he had made a decision. Morris smiled and said it was a great choice, but he still needed to think a little. Licht was not surprised. This answer had been sounding for some time. Pamela tried to convince him, begged him not to say that, because they were eagerly waiting for his quick participation, and Morris tried to say something, but Pamela interrupted him, so he couldn't say anything. They say she should carefully explain to him the advantages of joining them. She whispered in his ear that she would be his all night, and they would not rush anywhere. Morris was confused and a little embarrassed, suggested talking all night. Pamela and Licht left the room, and Pamela said goodbye, that she would see him later. When they left the room, Licht sincerely apologized to her for making her go through that. Pamela said that this is a classic case, exactly the right person in the right place, and asked him if he had seen those eyes, and he was already halfway there, and told him to go to persuade that foolish count to join her side. Licht understood and said he would return and report on that number. Morse from the Kingdom of Meadow switched to the side of the Pandora Empire. The scene returned to Ramsay. He was rushing to Darrell's house. In the letter, Darrell addressed Ramsay and informed him that Duke Ignis, worried about the fate of his state, decided to get rid of the traitor Morris because he conspired with the Pandora Empire to overthrow it. He also fervently wished for him to join the force and become a commander there, and for their victories to become joint. Ramsay arrived at the estate in Net Darrell. He admitted that he never imagined he would visit so soon. Ramsay said he never expected to receive such a challenge from him. Darrell laughed, asked if he was surprised, and smilingly said that he was quite a trickster. Ramsay replied that for him it was an honor to see this new side. Ramsay realized that this was planned back at that party. He asked him when the deployment was scheduled. Darrell told him that it was in Nidmai, and they were sending 1,500 fighters under the command of the same George, who had already been introduced. Ramsay thought there was still enough time, so he would prepare well. He asked about other nobles, and Darrell said that Duke Ignis would be present along with Count Ronald and Viscount Denys, and if everything came together, Marcus Lure would bring the number to over 10,000 soldiers. He told him that Ramsay would act under his command, and Ramsay asked if rewards would be prepared for him, and he, of course, told him that the lands of the counts that would be cancelled would be distributed according to merit. Ramsay said that the plot on the very western edge would hardly help him, and Darrell replied that he understood and intended to repay in another way. But to achieve this, a lot of effort had to be made. He ordered him to prepare 100 soldiers from Bartlett territory. Ramsay felt creepy from this news. Darrell repeated, Ramsay, prepare 100 soldiers and then I will give you some power. He clearly remembered how Veronica said she could immediately gather about 50 soldiers. He knew doubling them in a month was impossible, but this was not about Kenya, and he knew Darrell wanted him to do it. Ramsay also asked him to contact the Black Raven Guild. Darrell agreed, but said that if he hired mercenaries this time, he would pay out of his own pocket. Ramsay said he agreed and thought to himself, war costs money. And he never thought he would feel it exactly like this. Darrell promised to tell him where their base was, put directions on a scrap of paper, and quietly added that he hoped he had made a good deal. Soon Ramsay reached the place. Huge doors towered before him. He thought that such places always attract suspicious types, but he knew he could not afford to be choosy. He entered and saw Hawk wiping his glasses. He recognized Ramsay and greeted him warmly. Ramsay asked what he was doing here, and Hawk replied that this was where he had his bar. Hawk said he had something for him, asked him to sit down, and added that he would bring some milk now. After finishing his drink, Ramsay told Hawk that he needed the Black Raven Guild's help again. When Hawk asked what it was about, Ramsay handed over a letter. Hawk read it and understood that the Duke was personally calling Ramsay. Ramsay told him that he wanted 100 soldiers ready, and Hawk said that was quite feasible. There were quite a few of them, and hiring them all would cost a pretty penny. Ramsay said he knew and that he needed 70 from the Black Raven Guild. Hawk thought and said that it was about 100 ruber per person. Ramsay calculated it came to 7,000 ruber and asked when he should bring it. Hawk reassured him there was no need to rush. First they needed to see if they could gather those numbers. He added that he would contact him in a few days so he could come to him. He pushed him out of the bar. Ramsay saw that he could do nothing more. He was already about to return but suddenly realized he needed to contact Ashley. Returning back, he realized that he lacked money and had nothing. He received a generous 50,000 ruber from the Duke, but after taking in Veronica with her soldiers and paying mercenary fees to Hawk and the fee for gear for Ashley's troop, only 300 ruber remained, and that was for one person. Taking everything into account, he saw there was less than half the money, and he needed to reconsider production in that territory. And just then there was a knock at the door. It was Veronica. She told him that he locked himself in the room as soon as she returned and asked what the deployment status was. Ramsay informed her that they were expected to send 100 soldiers who were to march to the domains of Count Morse in Nidmai. Veronica was shocked and said that was indeed quite a lot. For the Viscount, even 20 would have been enough. She asked how he planned to gather such a large number. He told her that he could not handle it alone, so he asked the Black Raven Guild to build it. As soon as Ramsay said this, something clicked in his head. He pressed his hand to his face and whispered that he had been deceived. That was the point. He lowered his head in disappointment, and Veronica asked what he meant. Ramsay told her that it seemed strange to pay 50,000 rubers up front. They gave such a pile of money just to use him, blocked his escape, and drove him onto the battlefield, so naturally he had to rely on mercenaries, and he knew that the Black Raven Guild would return part of the money to the Duke. Ramsay suddenly realized that he had been played from the very beginning. He blurted out. He restrained himself and said there was no point in being sad. He informed Veronica that he had asked the Black Raven Guild to send 70 members, and Veronica replied that she understood and that 30 should be selected to depart. Ramsay then told her that she and Danny were on standby. She shuddered in shock and asked why. He replied that he needed the two of them to defend this territory, so he would lead the troops. Veronica asked if something had happened to him, but Ramsay sharply interrupted her, saying that everything must be done to prevent that, and entrusted her with selecting and training the squad. Hesitating a little, she agreed and said to him, "Leave it to me." She left in anger, and Ramsay wondered how they should act this time. It was May 17, and on that very day Hawk met Ramsay. They asked if the Lord himself would lead the troops. Ramsay said that they must definitely be on the side of the victors. Duke Ignis had about 10,000 warriors, while the Count's side suffered from a staggering shortage. They were short by as many as 1,000 soldiers. Hawk said he agreed. They could not decipher the Empire's moves, and wondered if reinforcements would be sent to Count Morris, or maybe the reinforcements were already converging. Ramsay hesitated, but Daryl noticed him and thanked him for coming, saying he appreciated it. Ramsay and Hawk bowed before him, and Daryl said that Hendrick's border army had set out west 2 days ago. Ramsay said they would definitely crush the merchants, then stood up. They said that Bartlett's troop would set out. The army moved forward, and Hawk said they first needed to meet with General George. As if going straight along this road, they would have come out on the lands of the Count. He asked Ramsay if he had prepared the horse, and Ramsay replied that he did not have such money due to some cunning trick of his own, to which Hawk laughed and asked what he was talking about. Ramsay put this aside for now, and asked him what he considered the smartest move. Ramsay managed to say that for him, the safest and most profitable option was, but Hawk interrupted him. They said that it plunders the surrounding towns and villages. This would most likely turn into such a fight, so he did not take Danny and Veronica with him. Danny was completely exhausted after the last skirmish, probably from such fights. Hawk agreed with the tactic, but asked how exactly to approach it, and added that if they continue attacking it, his reputation will suffer. Ramsay said he did not know all the nobles involved in this war, but if their pride is off the charts, no one will agree to such a role. He said that if they say they were forced into it and acted under orders, maybe then something will change. Hawk agreed and said that from his side it looks like a victorious battle, but the lords will want to take the glory for themselves in the main camp. He patted Ramsay on the back and ordered him to strike first and hard. Ramsay said that although they serve the border duke, they need to have the right to act as an independent force, so they will have to force the general to agree. Suddenly an idea struck him, and he asked Hawk if he had a map. Hawk handed him the map and suspiciously asked if he was planning something. Ramsay confirmed this and decisively said that they should cancel the merger with the border duke's army. Hawk asked if it was really all right after all. It was a direct order from the duke. Ramsay cut him off, saying they had been led by the nose for too long and it was time to pay back a little. At the front line, General Hendrick's army got angry and sharply asked what Bartlett's army was doing. He and the other viscounts were already standing there, waiting for them. One viscount said that maybe they shouldn't have called them to that battle, and another frowned and asked if, having just joined the camp under the count's command at the border, they would even be able to recruit soldiers. Another said that at the victory party, he had earlier heard praises and asked if those words hadn't made them too confident. A messenger entered the tent and reported that news had arrived from Lord Ramsay. The general saw that. The couriers bore Bartlett's coat of arms and thought they could afford equipment. He asked the messenger where the Lord himself was, and it seemed their meeting was delayed. The messenger fell to one knee and said that he was here to report that his lord was currently being attacked by the forces of Count Morris. The general froze at the news, and the viscount was frightened and exclaimed that they were supposed to win that battle. The general sharply commanded to calm down and ordered the messenger to immediately report all the details of what had happened. The messenger told him that their army was coming from the border count's domains in this direction, but as soon as it approached his domains, it was ambushed by volunteers from the villages of Mode and Rail. He said that his lord was fighting back and intended to capture those villages. The general said that first they would advance their troops, and those would join them as soon as they finished. The messenger then said that his lord was going to take the northern village and capture the city of Fort. The general was stunned by this, and the viscounts began whispering among themselves, saying that Fort was the second largest city in the count's domains with a population of over 1,000, so for Ramsay's army to take it was unrealistic. The general asked if that was true, and the messenger agreed. The general argued heatedly, claiming that it would not succeed because their forces were barely coping. He ordered the messenger to convey to his lord, capture only 2 villages, and quickly regroup. The envoy reported that his lord commanded 100 soldiers and was allowed to have an independent detachment from the border unit. He added that with the general's strength, defeating the merchant Morris would be easy and asked for rear cover. The viscounts gasped in surprise. Ramsay had 100 soldiers, while they themselves barely counted 20 to 50, and they could not understand how such a minor nobleman had gathered so many people. The general thought the situation was troubling. He was not talking nonsense, and moreover, all this was confirmed by the approval of Lord Darrell, so he said he understood, and told the messenger that he expected great deeds. The messenger then laughed, and one of the viscounts asked him if he really intended to allow them to do whatever they wanted. The general replied that it did not matter whether Farlett's army was there or not. The battle would not change because of that, so they too must set out. And joined Forrest together with Duke Ignes. He ordered everyone to prepare for the march. Then the scene shifted to Pamela and Morris. Morris was hiding under the blanket on his bed, and Pamela asked, "How much longer will you sit here? The sun is already high in the sky." Morris said fearfully that a large army was approaching them. Pamela reassured him, "Don't worry, everything will be fine. The Count has many capable subordinates." She grabbed his face and said that the Empire's reinforcements were already in place. Morris smiled, and his mood improved. Pamela gently said for him not to worry about anything and suggested playing a little more. They got down to some tasks. Outside the room, 2 stood guard Lick and Percy. Percy grumbled that he really did not want to be that man's subordinate, even temporarily, and Lick sharply replied for him not to say that it's part of the job. Percy agreed and said that he really had a point. Litz added that they would have to make more effort. At that very moment, the old man ordered his ministers to strike now, because it was pointless to hide when there was no hope for help. The minister objected, saying that if they just held on, reinforcements from the Empire would arrive soon, and ordered the guard to strengthen the defense. One man saw Percy and licked and anxiously asked if the Empire would send reinforcements. Percy and Lick exchanged glances, and Lick told him that, of course, they would do so. The Empire was currently organizing its troops, so fortifying was safe. The man was delighted to hear this. He ordered the guards to fortify the business. Percy and Lick smiled. In the Madiuk royal castle, the heir to the throne of the Mo Madiuk kingdom decisively stated that reinforcements could not be sent. Negotiations were the best option. The ministers anxiously asked him if he would abandon Count Morris, who shared their ideals. Emel said that both Count Morris and Duke Ignes were vital to their people, and asked that the people benefit from their bloodshed. He whispered to himself that this was the Empire, and they absolutely could not allow this to turn into a conflict. The minister said they understood his intentions, but asked how he planned to respond. He pondered, and loudly declared that all of Count Morris's lands would be taken away, and divided between Duke Ignes and others. The ministers were shocked. This would only support the anti-empire faction, so they needed to show resolve, otherwise it would set a bad example and the throne could be seized. They insisted on taking the chance to use the empire's power to teach them a lesson or completely destroy the Ignes faction. And we will actually see this. He constantly convinced himself that he did not care about the throne, he only wanted a happy life with his wife and children. Even more alarming sparks appeared, but he knew the meeting was unlikely to bring a solution. Everything would end with silent observation, and everyone would only protect themselves. He asked Hawk which village it was, and Hawk replied that it was quite small at the lower end of the scale, so with that number of people there would be no problem. He told Ramsay that he really played masterful and made it seem as if the village attacked first, so they capture neighboring villages as a pretext for looting. Ramsay said that joining the main force of Special Glory would not be allowed, and honestly, nothing was expected from it anyway, so it is much more reliable to move freely and collect money directly. He said for them to stick to the plan, and Hawk replied to him, "Count on me." The village began to run like falcons. He ordered the soldiers to take all supplies from the village, and commanded the villagers to gather in one place and not to worry, as if they were not resisting, they would all be free. Ramsay thought to himself, one must skillfully maneuver so as not to spoil Bartlett's reputation. Their plan was simple. First to envelop the village with flanks the Black Karen gang and Bartlett's detachments, then to capture hostages to force the villagers to surrender. Meanwhile, the Black Heron gang was raiding the village, taking all the treasures and supplies. They kept only the food needed for the campaign and sent everything else to the Barrett territory. 4 soldiers were attached to each cart, and those unaccustomed to battle were sent back. And so, when the peasants gathered in the center, the final touch came: the speech of Ramsay. He apologized for this, bowed his head, and shocked the peasants. He told them that he did not want to resort to such harsh methods, but he could not disobey Baron Hendrick's order and did not want to harm any of them. He ordered to march to Count Morris. The other villages were dangerous, apologized once again. The peasants whispered whether Baron had organized all this, and finally agreed to set out for Count Morris. Hawk saw this and called the Ramsay an actor. After they captured the village of Rose, he approached Ramsay and asked what was next and whether he really intended to go to the fort. Ramsay pondered, and Hawk replied that he supported the tactics, so he would not interfere with Ramsay's strategy. Ramsay thanked him and said it was time to move on. And so May 21 arrived. In the west of the kingdom of Madoc, on the lands of Count Morris, as agreed, 10,000 anti-imperial warriors gathered. Prince Agnes himself stood at the forefront, leading the army. He addressed his viscounts and counts, sincerely thanked them for gathering, and expressed his gratitude. He said that they had probably already heard the news Count Morris was in conspiracy with the Empire, and despite numerous chances to explain himself, Morris not only ignored them, but also began to strengthen his forces. He said this could no longer be tolerated. They decided it was necessary to unite this nation, torn by internal strife and external threats. Without delay, they would overthrow Count Morris here and now, and everyone there agreed. And a man named Rossi stepped forward and said that they should immediately proceed to the military council. He said with anxiety that the enemy had about 2,000 and they were already fortifying. Morris probably relied on reinforcements from the Empire. He said they needed to defeat them before the reinforcements arrived. One of the counts asked if they should immediately throw all forces into the attack. Rossi warned him that it would cost them too much. The Empire was lurking behind, so he wanted to minimize losses. Another count asked what they should do. Rossi was about to say something, but a soldier interrupted him and told them that a messenger wanted to speak with General George. George hesitated whether to let the messenger into this important meeting, but Rossi said it was allowed. Maybe it was urgent. Suddenly the messenger appeared, and George immediately recognized him as Courier Bartlett. He immediately asked what he wanted. The courier said he had news from Lord Ramsay and his plan. They attacked Maud and the village of Rose, but the peasants fled to Morris's castle. Jurg froze in shock. Chaos reigned in the battle, and he realized he had let them slip away. He asked the envoy why they did not take the peasants prisoner and said that sending the peasants to Morris's castle only strengthens the enemy. The messenger told him they were not taken because they were running out of supplies. George sharply said that they should have simply exterminated them all and asked why he allowed them to switch to Morris's side. The courier replied that his lord preferred to capture the castle. George was puzzled, and Rossi sharply asked the envoy if his lord really said that. The envoy confirmed that they planned to continue capturing neighboring villages and sending peasants to the castle. Rossi drove the messenger away, but before he left, he asked the name of his lord. He told them that his lord's name was Ramsay Barrett, Viscount, who serves under the command of Baron Darrell von Hendricks. Agnes praised the messenger, "You did well," and ordered him to go. Rosi thought to himself why he had not exterminated the peasants and driven them to the enemy's castle if they interpreted this to their advantage. So they were really going to lay siege. Rosi told the crowd that the best tactic for this battle was to surround Count Maurice's castle and lay siege to it. This stunned everyone, and one of the counts sharply said that he could not agree to this because they were not common people of low birth, true nobles with traditions and prestige, so in such a shameful fight their dignity would be tarnished. Rosi heard this and thought to himself about the duties of nobility retribule. And it was true that the territory needed to be governed. He knew they would have to put prestige above practicality, so Ignis asked Rosi to suggest another option. And Rosi shouted to the crowd that they needed to break through before the imperial army joined. He told the people that if this was decided, they should hurry and prepare to move west. Ignis noticed that Rosi was deeply thoughtful and asked him what had happened. And if something was spinning in his head, Rosi said that this count. Penetrating gaze of Ramsay Bartlett on the battlefield. And the preparation turned out to be quite intriguing. The scene shifted to Hawk and Ramsay, and Hawk asked him what their next move would be. They had already captured most of the villages, and only the fort remained nearby. Ramsay agreed because they lacked enough people to transport the captured supplies. Ramsay suggested pretending that they were surrounding Ford while they waited. Hawk asked him if they could do that. With such a number of people, they simply could not be surrounded, and just then a soldier approached Ramsay. He was informed that there was still some distance, but a small cavalry detachment was approaching them, and no one knew if they were friendly. Both Ramsay and Hawk were shocked. And Hawk ordered the guards, "Gather and prepare to intercept." Ramsay wondered whether that small detachment was here for reconnaissance or brought some message. The detachment approached, and Hawk stopped them, asking who their commander was. Even people from the detachments said that they were messengers of General George, representative of Baron Hendrik. They asked if this was Ramsay Bartlett's army. Ramsay confirmed this. He himself said that he was Ramsay. The messenger, stunned to see him, quickly apologized for addressing him while mounted, and told him that the general had called a meeting, so he should urgently move and gather at the main camp. They told him that the main camp was to the southwest from here. They said goodbye and left, and Ramsay asked Hawk what he thought about it. He said that as soon as the independent cavalry was recognized, a meeting was immediately called. He admitted that he did not understand it, but knew they had no choice, so they had to go. He announced to the soldiers that the break was over, and they were moving out, and Ramsay wondered if the situation on the battlefield had changed. Soon he reached the main camp, and Hawk saw so many soldiers and people that he said the scale was impressive. A guard approached, asked if Lord Bartlett was here, and immediately ran away. Ramsay briefly confirmed that he was Ramsay, and seeing the guard's polished appearance, wondered if he served some higher lord. The guard jumped up when he saw Ramsay, and told him that Duke Agnes had asked him to appear and asked him to follow. Ramsay was surprised to hear that the Duke was here, and said to him. Hawk decided that he would leave the army to him. Hawk, also impressed by the Duke's appearance, told Ramsay to go ahead. Finally, they approached the tent. The guard announced himself, apologized for the disturbance, and said he had brought Lord Bartlett with him, after which he ordered Ramsay to enter. And only upon seeing the Duke himself, Ramsay knelt down and introduced himself, saying he had heard that he was needed, so he hurried here. Ignis told him that he could relax. There was no need to be so tense. He said that the one who dealt with it was not him, but Rosi. Rosi introduced himself as the Duke's assistant. He told Ranji that he had a few questions for him and asked him to simply answer. After all, Ignis is a good person and won't get angry over trifles. At first, he asked why his army attacked the villages. Ranji replied that they simply made a move to weaken the enemy. Rosi agreed destroying the peasants and shaking production is one of the tactics, but unable to contain her surprise, she asked why he allowed them to escape. Ramsay replied that although there were conflicts between them, they were still subjects of the same kingdom, and due to the huge difference in forces, victory was obvious, so simply killing them seemed cruel. Rosi asked couldn't he just enslave them, that would fill his treasury and kill two birds with one stone. Renji replied that his army lacked the resources to bring the sleeves back, so it was a difficult choice, but they decided it was better to spare their lives. Rosi suggested stopping there. Unfortunately, everything went wrong as he predicted and turned into a siege. Ramsay asked what he was getting at, and Rosi snapped that he was insincere and sent the peasants to Maris's castle so they would eat the supplies faster because he expected Duke Morris to go out to sea. Rosi smiled and said that what's done is done, and added that at tomorrow's siege he would like to hear his proposals. Ramsay asked what else they could do, since with such a difference in forces, shouldn't they just go head-on and attack aggressively? Rosi said that would only increase their losses, and he wanted to win while minimizing their losses. Ramsay thought to himself, he said so, but they had no military training at all. Ramsay said that was just one example. But then he suggested something. After talking a bit, he left, and Ignis asked Rosi what he thought about the current strategy. Rosi replied that some adjustments could still be made, but overall the direction was good. He continued that for the rural Lord Ramsay, it was quite manageable, and from Baron Hendrik he expected a few really good things. Ignis muttered that it was not fun at all when he was shown new toys, so maybe he should also leave his mark on them. It was already May 23, and Morris was under great stress. He grabbed Penelue and sharply asked, "Where is the reinforcement? Why aren't they here?" She told him she would check it, and sighing irritably, left the room. When she entered the room, she saw Percy and said to her, "Well done." Pamela asked where Licht was, and she said he was pulled in to help the soldiers. Pamela sat down and asked her, "Isn't it time to leave this?" Percy told her that she and Licht had just discussed how to quietly leave at night. Pamela was confused and said she had heard nothing about it, and Percy replied that that was exactly why, because she hadn't told her. And she was told, "Try your best." Pemlagard got angry and said that they needed to collect those jewels for which they made the Count pay. Just at that moment, Lit entered the room looking worried. Pamela said she was glad he was safe. And Percy asked him what was wrong. He said that something had fallen on him. He said that although dusk was already approaching, that Iron Forest showed no sign of retreat, and they were still storming the gates without arrows. Pamel said it was better to break the gates, and since there were so many of them, it was better to just aim at the castle gates. Lit agreed the difference in forces was staggering, and the gates were still unbroken. They had very few troops, and it seemed as if they were not going to take this castle at all. Percy said that they were probably afraid of Imperial reinforcements. They thought it would come just when they hid there, and Licht asked in surprise if that was really so. Pamels said she didn't care at all about their plans, and asked Licht how they would get out of here at all. Licht said that they were surrounded by enemies, and the battle raged, so there was no choice then they had to blend into the crowd of townspeople and escape, and fortunately, many peasants had already taken refuge in that castle in a strange way. Percy said they had no other choice, and Pamela said she would quickly pack her things and asked him to wait. Licht thought about what the Duke's army had planned and realized cunning strategists were hiding in the kingdom. They skillfully wear down the enemy and exhaust him without causing great destruction. Now it was May 24, and Lords Douglas and Dobie were fervently discussing the battle. Some said that the anti-imperial forces attacked day and night. They divided their troops and probably didn't even have time to rest, and he insisted that the whole problem was the arrows. They were used up too quickly, and due to the lack of proper arrows, they were simply finished off. He asked his soldiers if they had already found Lechta and Percy, and they replied no. Dobai told him that it was enough the Empire had cornered them from the very beginning. They were not going to send reinforcements. They were simply used as pawns to exhaust the kingdom's forces. He said that from now on they needed to think about the future. They could not count on reinforcements, so surrender might be an option. He asked Douglas what he thought, and Douglas replied that if they surrendered, they would all be shot, so they would fight to the last, like true warriors. Dobai said they could do that, but in doing so they were dragging the townspeople and soldiers into it, and Douglas warned that if this continued, the townspeople would turn into sleeves, so they needed to fight to achieve better conditions for peace. Just at that moment, a soldier approached and told Douglas that the enemy was intensifying the offensive, so if someone had to take command at the front, Douglas replied that he would take it upon himself and left. Dobai thought to himself, as a general, they could not afford to miss the right moment to retreat. He entered the room where Morris was sitting. He was wrapped in a blanket and afraid to go out. Dobai whispered that they needed to surrender. There were no reinforcements from the Empire, so no chance of victory, but Morris firmly refused and asked where Pamela was. Dobai grabbed Morris and slapped him. He said to him, "Wake up, the war is in full swing." He told him that Pamela had disappeared and that the Empire had used them. Morris understood what had happened and simply sat down, overwhelmed by disappointment and a sense of betrayal. The scene shifted to Ignis and Rosi. Ignis asked about the situation. She replied that only 2 days had passed, but fatigue was already noticeable, so another 2 or 3 days and they would calmly capture the castle. Ignis only smiled, so Ramsay's plan worked. Suddenly, a flash of the past appeared before them. Rosi's conversation with Ramsay, in which he suggested moving the army in 3 shifts. He explained, "We divide the army into 3, alternate the rest, there will be fewer losses, and we will collect the tax day and night." Moreover, they attacked without using arrows. During the siege, replenishing weapon supplies was extremely difficult, so if they did not shoot, their supplies would run out in a few days. Ramsay suggested softening the attacks a bit for the first 2 days. This way, they would reduce losses on both sides and slowly exhaust the enemy. Returning to the present, Rosi said they needed to press the enemies on the wall with arrows without tips were already having an effect, and if they held out for another 2 or 3 days, they needed to watch that the soldiers did not falter. Just at that moment, a guard entered the tent. They hurried and reported that the enemy seemed to want to surrender. This stunned Agnes, and after some time, while Idnis and other lords sat, Count Maurice von Dodd arrived bound and shackled with his companions. He knelt down. Ignis asked them what had happened and why they suddenly changed their minds, and Maurice replied that he no longer saw any chance of victory, so he could not hurt people unnecessarily, and that if this allowed him to save his own skin, it was a small price. He and Agnes exchanged a glance. Agnes glanced. Ivan said he would say no more, and, affirming this decision, promised that the soldiers and townspeople would be safe. They would not be made slaves either. Maurice said he had no regrets and ordered his head to be cut off. Agnes gave a signal to his soldier. He instantly drew his sword and, with one swift motion, beheaded Maurice, finishing him off. Then he covered his body with a cloak. Then Ignis asked Douglas and Dobby what was happening in the Count's lands. Dobby said he was not going to justify himself, it was their fault, but they were only puppets dancing to the Empire's tune. Dobby told him the whole story. At first, everyone insisted that Lord Maurice get married and promised to send a capable daughter. Although he was somewhat interested, his bride never arrived. They gave convincing excuses, supposedly choosing a suitable bride for the Count's house, but there was never really a plan at first. 2 imperial generals were sent undercover for protection. Pretending to be loyal and promising full support, they decided to turn their bows against His Highness the Prince. But those generals simply disappeared from the battlefield. No one found their bodies. He said they probably fled, expecting the castle to fall. They realized they had fallen into the Empire's trap, no reinforcements in sight, and surrender became their only choice. He told him that Lord Maurice deeply repented and that he himself regretted, foolishly believing the Empire's sweet words. He had needlessly harmed his soldiers and citizens. In this situation, he had nothing left to do only to offer his own head and beg for mercy for the citizens. Ramsay heard this and thought to himself, although those generals sneaked inside, they retreated too easily. Why would the Empire sow such chaos in the kingdom? They will be asked to advise on strategy and find out if it was the same Rosi whom everyone called the genius of rumors, and Rosi only asked, what strategy? And Dobby told her that he was talking about this siege. The attacks day and night really exhausted him, and arrows of an unknown type irritated him. Rosi understood what he meant and pointed at Ramsay, who was stunned by this. Everyone discussed this among themselves, saying that he was very young and that he made a smart proposal. Renzi wondered why she named him specifically. Rosi clapped her hands to silence everyone and said that they needed to move on to the next question. Ignis said that he would soon announce the fate of Lord Dobby and Lord Douglas and ordered his guards to take them away. After that, he addressed the crowd and announced that he would now move on to awards and honors. He said that the first honor. The campaign approached General George. Everyone applauded, and Ramsay thought to himself that this part looked like a performance. But in this operation, no one truly distinguished themselves. Even if they capture the county, the money and lives spent on the campaign will not return, and the rewards will more likely go to the more powerful nobles. After some time, Agnes said that he had finished distributing awards and decorations, and told everyone that they did well. When people began to disperse, Rosi dialed Ramsay's number. She sincerely thanked him for his hard work this time, and Ramsay smiled and said he greatly appreciated her generous words. Rosi told him that Ignis also promised him a reward and asked him to follow her. Ramsay fell silent in surprise but still followed to meet Ignis. Ignis sincerely thanked him for the strategy, saying that it was thanks to it that they won so easily, and Ramsay smiled and replied that he was very pleased to hear such words. Agnes said that he wanted to honor him with a reward, but unfortunately, there was no land around Bartlett to give, so instead he gave him a bag full of gold. Ramsay was disappointed by this, but agreed anyway. He thought to himself, to the north Hendrik march, they can't reach there, to the east the royal domain which only the king can occupy, to the west Borden barony, no one can interfere there, and with the southern dominion they can't do anything either. To enrich the land, they needed harvests and people to cultivate them. He knew he could no longer expand their territory. Agnes read the expression on his face and immediately understood what Ramsay wanted. She told him that if he aimed for a higher goal, perhaps a path would appear, and Ramsay was shocked to see that Agnes had read his face. Ignis told him that if he wants land, he must seize it, and he must devour Baron Borden. He was shocked by this and laughed. He said bitterly that he was asking for the impossible. The difference in forces was too great. Behind the boards in the emptiness stood Count Gardel. His weak army had no chance. Ignis asked if he still bore the wounds inflicted by Lord Darrell. Instead of everything else, he would extend a helping hand to him. Ramsay was frightened by this and said he wanted to think. He turned back to the hawk he had seen. I saw a bag of gold in his hand and asked that they give them some of the loot, but Ramsay, ignoring him, just went ahead. He thought to himself, Ignis is ready to help, but they are not even neighbors, how could they intervene? And the outcome of Bartlett's confrontation with the coalition of Borden and Gardel was clear to him as day. But so that the happiness of the townspeople remained unharmed, he could not kindle even the smallest spark of conflict. He thought he should enjoy a slow life, mastering these lands, but everything was not going smoothly. Returning to his territory, he saw that goats were wandering everywhere. Veronica greeted him warmly, and he said it had become lively there. She said her master had sent a lot of livestock and supplies from the expeditions. Ramsay told her that goats are omnivorous and thrive even on barren lands, so they are the ideal livestock for them. He asked Eric to set up an enclosure for chickens and goats. Eric replied that he was already working on it and tried to come up with a few more ideas. But Danny interrupted him, apologized for putting him in an awkward position right after his return, and asked him to come to the reception. A guest appeared in his room. Ramsay was surprised, so he headed to the reception to see a well-dressed man who then led him back to the same reception. He told Ramsay that he had finally succeeded. Ramsay was puzzled. The man said he had waited quite a long time, so Ramsay said he did not believe they had a meeting and asked who he was. The man awkwardly apologized for his oversight and introduced himself as Henry, the legitimate son of Baron Elma de Dominica. Ramsay heard this and instantly understood. Baron Dominic rules the territory adjoining Bartlett from the south. He wondered why he had come exactly now. He asked him what business Lord Henry had with him. Henry said that since they became neighbors, he decided to stop by to say hello, but upon hearing that Ramsay was at war with Lord Hendrik, he timed his visit for his return and added that the sofa and table were a gift, so he should feel free to use them. He took a sip from the glass, said the wine was intriguing, and asked if he was called Cast. Ramsay got angry because Danny was serving Henry Casa. He sat down and said that hearing this from Henry made him feel that all his efforts were worth it. Henry told him that he really liked it and asked to be taught how to do it. He had already asked others, and they said only Ramsay knew. Ramsay replied that he couldn't. He considered it an important resource, thought he would never give away his money-making recipe, and wondered if Henry was really that naive. Henry then simply told him, "Sell me this," and immediately asked how much it cost. Ramsay said he would sell him a barrel for 3,000 ruble. He raised the price and thought to himself that it was a bit too much. But Henry, without hesitation for a minute, said he would take 10 barrels. Ramsay was surprised, promised to prepare it and send it, and Henry added, "When the time comes, visit me." Ramsay asked if he meant at home, and struggled with himself. Was he getting too close, like a schoolboy? Henry said it was for a date, it should be ready in 4 days. He said goodbye and left, saying he would wait for him. Danny said that Henry was a real hurricane, and Ramsay said he just wanted to rest a little. Run on the 3rd of June. Roger, Ramsay, and Danny set off south from the territory of Bartlett. Roger was pulling the cart, was tired, and asked, "Are we there yet?" Ramsay said it was time and that it was also his first time in the city. Roger asked Danny to switch, but Danny replied that they had just changed shifts. Then Roger inquired if they could take a short break. They took a break, and Ramsay asked what they would do after the delivery, whether they would return to the village immediately. Danny objected, saying they were heading to the Dominican territory, but immediately forgot the name of the capital. Roger reminded him that it was called Dominion Dortum, and Danny said he thought about checking it out. He and Roger then both asked Rangi for pocket money. Rangi thought to himself that this was a reward for carrying the goods, and told him he would give it to them, but only after they finished the delivery. They eagerly rushed to the cart. Roger's fatigue receded, and he told Danny to leave the cart to him, while Ramsay called them stingy. Soon he arrived in Dortum. A huge concrete building towered before him. He saw a long queue at the entrance and a guard checking people apparently. Merchants were going back and forth all the time, and after some time, it was their turn. Rangi told the guard that he was from the Bartlett territory and had arrived on behalf of Lord Henry from the Dominic house. The guard signaled to another, apologized to Ramsay for the delay, and asked him to wait a little. Ramsay was surprised by this sudden change, and they thought that the spoiled boy Henry would be treated more easily. Just then Henry appeared, apologizing to feel the wait and ask if he hadn't waited too long. Ramsay calmed him down. "Don't worry," and Henry immediately suggested going to his home. Ramsay saw that he was, as always, persistent. Soon they reached his estate near the city. Ramsay noticed 2 people waiting by the gate, and he asked Henry who they were. Henry told him that they were his father and mother. Ramsay quickly bowed and apologized for his behavior. Henry's father told him not to be so formal. A very long time had passed since Henry last brought a friend to his place. He invited him into the house, touching his shoulder. His mother said they had also prepared delicious treats. Ramsay asked what to do with the goods, and Henry replied that his family would take care of the rest. One of the workers bought those goods and gave the money to Danny and Roger. Ramsay felt awkward. He could no longer say they were not friends, and more importantly, he needed not to anger the neighboring lords. Andrew's father introduced himself, Elma de Dominic. Ramsay bowed and introduced himself, and Elma told him not to be so tense, just relax and enjoy. Ilma cried with joy. Henry finally had a friend. His mother brought a plate full of food, told Henry to take it and treat his friend, and if he went somewhere to take some pocket money. Henry was embarrassed by all this and told him enough. He nudged Ramsay, saying that they had to go. Ramsay thought to himself that it seemed like a rather ordinary family. Henry suddenly appeared in his room and told him to hang his coat anywhere. Henry laughed and said that he had just pushed aside what he did not want, and Ramsay praised his room, saying that all the furniture in it was first class. Henry said that they are a family who got rich from trade, and his father bought himself a title from an impoverished royal family. And because of this, the old aristocrats saw them as enemies. Ramsay thought to himself that parents are so happy, so they probably felt sorry that he had no friends. He realized that Henry was not entirely innocent either. Henry told him to take care of everything, at least in front of the family. Ramsay was surprised and thought to himself, in noble circles, family interests always interfere. Here one could simply nod easily, but he did not want to do that. He asked Henry to show him around the city. Henry asked again if it was about Dorodin. Ramsay nodded and agreed. It is a noisy trading city, definitely worth visiting in the future. He thought to himself that whether they would become friends would be decided by their communication. Henry rejoiced upon hearing this and said that no one knows this city better than him, so he will show him everything. They both went outside and walked through different shops and markets when suddenly one of the sellers stopped Henry. He said he had excellent wine and offered a glass, but Henry refused, saying he was busy today and said he would come to him tomorrow. Ramsay noticed that the townspeople really liked him. Henry noticed a stall with fried bread and asked the women to bake 2 fresh buns. Ramsay noticed this and realized it would be difficult for him to fit into such a free atmosphere. They both savored the fried buns, and Henry asked him if there was no such town in the lands of Ramsay, to which Ramsay replied that they usually went to trade in Hendo. Henry suddenly noticed something and told Ramsay that there was no need to speak formally anymore. No one would scold him for it. Ramsay agreed, and Henry said that Hendo was a big city, but they lost nothing in trade. Ramsay laughed and agreed, and at that moment a huge castle caught his eye. Henry asked him what was wrong. Ramsay inquired if this church was connected to a smaller church, and Henry replied that there were many merchants from the empire in the city. A separate place was even prepared for their prayers. Ramsay clenched his hand in anxiety and asked, "Does this mean that the Dominic family is on the side of the empire?" He thought to himself that if so, the Bartlett family would become enemies of Duke Ignace, and they could be attacked from the west by Baron Borden and from the south by Count Dominic. Henry said nothing more special. He explained that they maintained neutrality, did not take any side, and did not despise anyone. They were a family that lived by trade, so as long as they paid, anyone was their client. He left. The captain said that the unpopular newcomer, like them, had not received any offers from either side. Ramsay told him not to belittle himself like that. Then Henry asked, "Did you find what you wanted?" Then Ramsay noticed a flower that immediately caught his eye. Henry said that this flower had just been brought from the empire, small but beautiful. Ramsay recognized it and knew it was different. In a past life it grew in his grandmother's garden, and he knew it was a potato flower. He aggressively told the flower seller that he would take that flower, and she replied that it would cost 5 rubarbaras. Ramsay heard this and suddenly realized that they had not noticed at all that it could be food. Henry asked him if he liked flowers. Ramsay thought to himself that it was better to stay silent for now, and told Henry that collecting flowers was a gentleman's business. Henry looked at him strangely, grabbed him, and said he would take him to a truly wonderful place. He led him into a mysterious alley. Ramsay asked what kind of shop it was and if it was safe here, and Henry reassured him, "Don't worry, I'm a regular here." They approached the shop door where a man stood guard. He greeted Henry, and Henry introduced him to Ramsay. Ramsay smiled and told the man he was glad to meet him, then asked what kind of place this was. The man told him that this was a slave shop and that he was its owner, Morris. They both entered the shop, and Ramsay was stirred with unease. He had heard rumors about it, but this was his first time inside. He asked Henry what he usually did here, and Henry replied that today he was looking for someone to play with, and then they would be hired at his home and even paid. Henry left smiling, and Morris said to Ramsay, "If you like someone, let me know." Ramsay remembered that Veronica also said they needed cases. He thought to himself that he could not let feelings from his past life about buying cases hold him back. He noticed that the sleeves were of all ages and genders, and their prices varied greatly. He saw a door and asked Morris what was behind it. Morris asked him if he was interested and if he wanted to take a look. He agreed, and they both entered a huge hall. Morris explained that former nobles and priests or their sons and daughters had gathered here, in short, noble people. He explained that they were proud and difficult to deal with. Few buyers wanted them, but it was valuable merchandise and sold at a high price. Ramsay saw this and thought to himself, here people like him and even higher nobles were just sleeves. Then a boy appeared in shackles. The meeting in the dungeon was about to take place, and fate began to unfold.